Recording in progress.
In the stillness of the night, each person's hope to realize his dream continues to smolder even in sleep. A dream of a brighter future. A dream of a cleaner world for our children. A dream to fly high. We see you. This is our vision, that together we soar. The Filipino families' needs for their living and working environments are fast evolving. Every step you take, we are there to offer solutions. Our continuous innovation is underscored by our steadfast commitment to support you in your efforts to improve your homes and workspaces. Our facilities adhere to the highest standards in the industry. Our zero-generated wastewater program is the first of its kind in the Philippines. A closed production system for minimal dust dispersal ensures a cleaner environment. We value excellence, and our people are proof of that. We provide lead-free, low VOC and odorless products that contain innovative ingredients to improve their performance. Products with antibacterial protection technology ensure that your family is shielded from potentially harmful organisms. We feel you. We have created strong international partnerships to give you products with your convenience in mind. Like paint with Teflon surface protector technology for walls that are easy to clean. We hear you. For the rainy season, our water-based roof paint will protect you, and you can rest in the knowledge that you and your loved ones will be safe in a dry haven when the heavens pour. We understand you. We have a heat-reflective roof coating.
Nice to meet you.
It keeps surface temperatures cool, which brings down your energy costs. Our water-based paint provides excellent hiding. You need less, so it saves you time, effort, and money. We care for you. We are one with you in building a cleaner environment for your family. We gave the world the first air cleaning paint with crystal-active photocatalytic technology. We share the Filipino spirit of wanting a better future for our families. We celebrate your milestones with you. Whether together or apart, as long as you are aspiring for a better tomorrow, we are there at your side. And we are committed to the country's future generation. We are one with you. We support deserving students and provide them with the means for an education. Even our country's wildlife, they too need help. We support you. Across the nation and beyond, we continue to explore new horizons with cutting-edge technology providers. We tirelessly offer you the best solutions to every unique situation. In all aspects, we strive to think ahead of you, the Filipino family, and provide answers to your questions and needs on the home and workspaces that you inhabit. We are explorers in our world. We are innovators in our craft. We have been your partners since 1953, and we are committed to continue understanding and serving your needs. because we are Boysen.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to
All right.
another Arktoberfest episode on this Saturday afternoon. Last week na lang natin, IPP, ating
Yup.
Arktoberfest celebration. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself. I am your host for today, Archie Tolentino, and with me this afternoon, co-hosting our IPP past president ng Quezon City South Triangle, si Architect Benj San Victor. Sir, gandang hapon, sir.
Kumusta dyan? Dito sa CDO, sobrang init ngayon.
Ay wow, CDO nga pala, galing ko si
CDO
si
based.
IPP. Oo.
Buti okay internet, sana makisama. So far okay naman.
Okay yan, IPP. Hindi dapat dapat medyo maganda-ganda internet connection mo ngayon kasi mabigat-bigat yung guest this afternoon. Pero bago yan, IPP, i-remind lang ulit natin yung ating mga participants of the house rules for this afternoon's session, right? Okay, house rule number 1. To ease the validation of your attendance, only the email address associated in your Zoom account and the one you entered in your registration form can enter the meeting. In the event of logging out due to intermittent connection or insufficient gadget power supply, please log back in using the same registered email address associated with your Zoom account. No? Hindi Google account. Hindi yan. Ayan. Use the official Oktoberfest events virtual background and strictly follow the standard naming as follows. Kita nyo naman yung example natin. Number 3, you must be inside the Zoom meeting to be a valid participant. Facebook live viewing or YouTube is not a valid proof of attendance. Number 4, participants shall be prohibited from turning off their cameras, so please observe the proper dress code.
Yeah, and I think that kalimutan dito is yung evaluation at the end.
Iyan na natin.
So, yeah.
Yes, don't forget to answer the evaluation form and the quiz
Yes.
after the event para maging valid yung attendance natin. Required in PRC yan. Okay, next. All participants' microphone will be on mute during the speaker's presentation. So kung may question kayo, please use the reaction button in the chat box for engagement interaction during the Q&A segment of the program. Or even habang nag-speak yung natin mga speakers, kung may question kayo, type in nyo lang. Right? Certificate of attendance will be issued to those who completed the required Zoom log time and successfully passed 70% of the assessment exam, which is answerable within 24 hours after the event for all pre-approved CPD programs. In return to the support that our industry partners, mga sponsors natin, render through their sponsorship, participating to our event allows marketing-related materials and promotional tools to be shared to your email inboxes. The views and opinions of featured guests do not reflect the official stand and position of the United Architects of the Philippines and the QC South Triangle Chapter or the hosts. Yeah. Damay tayo.
Disclaimer kagad.
All right. So before after all those house rules, let's begin with the program proper and let's start with an invocation.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Kayang magiliw, kaya sagsinahanan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y kumanan. upang inilang wika ng magiting sa manlulupin. Ikapasisipin sa nagatang tulog sa simulan sa langit ng pagkaw ay hinatang tulagaw sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawag mo'y tagumpay na nagkilingin. Ang ituwin at araw niya kay nagwang ay di matitinig. Lumang ang araw ng walang pansin ka, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang bigaya ng kangay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. United Architects of the Philippines are we, sworn to uphold our profession's dignity. Ours is the great to design and plan. We shall perform the family of man as architects can build the artistry and vision. Become the hearts of vision and illumination. Thanks to ourselves to serve our country. We have heard and heard so yes, our defense we have lived in song.
I shall work with this general objective, that I am accountable to God, to Mother Earth, to my country, to my fellow men, and to myself. I shall uphold the ideals and follow the norms and ethical conduct of this noble profession. I shall pursue moral and professional excellence to the utmost level of integrity, through industrious dedication and meaningful application to my work that merits a reputation for quality of services worthy of fair remuneration. I shall pledge myself to the highest standard of professionalism in relation to clients, colleagues, industry partners, and society. I shall dedicate myself to the pursuit of creative endeavor towards the goal of enlightened art and science, generously sharing it. I shall respect the rights and works of my colleagues in the profession and confine my comments to constructive intents. I shall endeavor to do my duty in the protection of our common environment and the preservation of architectural heritage for the sake of the present and future generations. So help me God.
All right.
Yes.
Yun. So after all the official procedure has been done, again, welcome everyone to this afternoon's Arktoberfest session featuring Genry Umali and Tim Kobe of 8 Inc. Yan, IPP, kamusta na?
Yes. Okay naman. Sobrang excited ako na kinakabahan. Medyo starstruck ako sa mga guests natin today. So,
Same.
I hope we pull it off, di ba?
Same. We are blessed and honored to have our guests this afternoon, especially si Genry. Ano na to, returning guest na to eh.
Yes. Thank you,
Yung
Jenny,
naalala
for
ko yung
time.
Naalala ko yung ano niya, IPP, yung guesting niya sa Arky Hustle natin before.
I think he was our second guest ng Arky Hustle.
Second guest ng Arky Hustle. Yung season 2 na to nung ano natin, di ba? Nung
Correct.
Triangle Sessions. Tapos naalala ko yung presentation niya was, sabi ko nga kay Genry, it was almost master class in retail design. Talagang pinakita niya yung process nung paano sila nagde-decide, nung itsura, nung placement, at least nung planning, no retail experience of how people behave when they're inside the store.
Correct.
I guess we're gonna be hearing more about it this afternoon with the same format.
Yep. I'm looking forward to it. So game. Can we introduce our speaker?
Introduce natin ang ating next speaker for the last session of Arktoberfest, si Architect Genry Bonifacio Umali. He is currently Director for the Environments and Program Management of 8 Inc. Genry is a Filipino architect and director at 8 Inc. Singapore, leading the environments team in creating meaningful human experiences through a holistic approach. A design and program lead, he provides creative direction, leads concept ideation, design strategies, and detailed construction methodologies for the studio's multidisciplinary projects across the region. He also manages project implementation and staffing resources between other 8 Inc. global offices. So hindi busy itong taon to. Yan. His projects across the Asia-Pacific region, Turkey and Dubai have spanned different industries ranging from finance and telecommunications to hospitality, retail, and real estate. Key projects in Singapore and Asia-Pacific region include Shimano Cycling World at Singapore Sports Hub. Maganda yan, nakita ko sana yan eh, last presentation niya. OUE Restore at Downtown Gallery, Changi Precinct, Innovation Hub, Master Plan, Globe Gen 3. Ganda nung Genry saka Gen 3. Retail program and iconic flagship in the Philippines. Yan yung nasa BGC. Na Globe. You made Bridge. Maklase yun. United Overseas Bank flagship in China and a 200-key hotel and office development in Melbourne, Australia. Beyond the region, Genry also collaborates with other 8 Inc. studios designing unique experiences for clients including Bank PAS in Turkey and Majid Al Futtaim in Dubai. Prior to joining 8 Inc., Genry worked on private residential projects and corporate interior fit-outs and offices in Singapore and the Philippines. He received his Bachelor of Science in Architecture degree from Mapua University and obtained his architecture license in 2011. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome to the stream Architect Genry
Bonifacio Umali.
Woohoo!
Hi.
Genry! Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for giving time for our event, Genry.
Oh,
Of course.
CV mo pa lang, parang hindi ka busy eh. So,
Naman, may time pa matulog.
ayan. We're happy to have you here and we hope you again enjoy yung natin, yung stream natin this afternoon, especially with a few drinks. Tanghaling tapat no? May inom-inom na.
Oo nga, nakita ko nga dito yung with beer ba? Ayun yung screen may 2 beer anyway.
Eh syempre, Arktoberfest to eh. Hindi pwede mo. Pero just to set the mood of the stream, no. This is supposed to be it's a formal event because it's a CPD applied program, no. Pero again, the aim of Arktoberfest is to have this not naman light conversation, pero at least a less structured conversation with you, the speaker, and us, the participants. No? Medyo drop muna natin yung mga sir, mga architect, ganyan. Kasi minsan, pagka masyadong formal, takot tayo magtanong or takot tayo mag-base ng ideas. So I guess we're providing this platform for everyone So, sa mga participants, okay, mahiya magtanong kay Jen, mabait yan. Ay, sabi niya kanina hindi siya mabait. Pero ano, let's all have this. Let's enjoy this afternoon, this Saturday afternoon with the little bit of education and idea. Ano ba tawag doon, IPP? Idea exchange?
Change.
Yan, yan. So without further ado, Architect Genry. Drop ng architect yan. Genry, take it away. Sorry.
Okay,
Alright.
thanks Archie. Wait,
Sure,
share
sure.
ko lang yung screen ko. Let me know if disable daw yung screen sharing. Wait, hold on.
Tech,
Oh,
to share.
okay na. Wait. Tama ng desktop.
Alright, okay na yata, Genry.
Wait, baka hindi ko makita yun.
Kaso email mo yung lumabas eh.
Ay, email ko ba? Wait.
Dahil mo hindi sinasagot ng email, no? Grabe. De, joke lang. Busy.
Ayun.
Paghahanap
This is
na okay na ba?
Oops.
Okay na.
Yan.
Yan.
Alright.
Okay.
Okay.
Full view, hindi ko may navigator. Sige.
Alright. That's it. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the introduction. Medyo naka-pressure. And thank you, UAP STC, specifically to Archie and Adrian for the opportunity to share what we do. And hopefully, this afternoon I could provide insights to architects and designers alike, specifically in retail design and architecture. So as mentioned earlier, my name is Genry. I'm also an architect by profession. Originally, I'm from UAP Alabang. So yeah. And then I'm currently based in Singapore for the last, I think, 10 to 12 years. In fact, ako na lang ating naiwan dito sa mga classmates ko. I'm currently the director for environments at 8ing Singapore, basically leading the regional studio in both business and the creative side of things. So for today, I'll be sharing some insights based on the things that I've learned so far over the last few years in terms of retail design and identify key principles in designing retail spaces. So of course, understanding that each of us has several processes that we follow. With us, I just want to share our thought process on how we come up with retail design and essentially retail experiential design. Okay, so to start with, I'll show some well-known brands and how their spaces looks like. So first of all, Apple Store Marina Bay Sands. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with this. So it's a glass enclosed, I don't know, half sphere thing that is floating, well, at least with the impression of floating on top of the Marina Bay water body. But then in reality, it's actually connected underneath through another retail space that connects directly to Marina Bay Sands. So in terms of interiors, it's, again, simple, clean, and iconic as always. And siguro ano lang most of the things that was carried onto the original retail program was still there. But then, of course, when Foster took over the retail program, they've introduced several new touch points and concepts within the space. So, for example, they now have those trees with built-in benches around it, which wasn't part of the original retail program. So the idea with retail store kasi is over every 5 years, they would tend to refresh. Now, depending on how the customer journey will change over time, and they would introduce several new ideas as well. Next is an Aesop store. So for those who are into skincare, and I must say really expensive skincare, we all know that Aesop, similar to Apple, has a variety of bespoke spaces in key cities globally. So normally you wouldn't find an Aesop store that has the similar look and feel na magkapares within the same location or within the country. Usually they would hire different design studios to create unique store designs depende sa location. However, one of the most distinctive characteristic of an Aesop store is essentially the scent and attention to detail. So normally when you enter an Aesop store, or even before entering the Aesop store, you would smell the products. So that essentially drives the customers inwards to the store and check it out, even though most likely they won't buy anything or just try the samples. So one of the most striking characteristics of an Aesop store is even though they have different look and feel, there is always something sculptural within the space. So for example, in their old store in Ion, they used to have the hanging ceiling wooden slats or vertical slats that also doubles as the lighting fixture. And then for this specific example, I guess the iconic feature would be the sink and the standalone island. However, all of these qualities, regardless of their differences in each location, represents the brand's luxurious image. And the next is COS. So it's known for designer clothing. And normally they would have simple spaces with warm floors and whitewash walls and ceiling. However, it's being complemented by expensive and branded furnishing. So while the store is minimally designed, the products tend to stand out and somewhat shifts the focus from the space to generally what they offer, which is the products. And then lastly, for those sneaker freaks, Archie, I'm looking at you. Lastly, the Nike House of Innovation in New York, or what they call the Living Retail. So in addition to typical shoe displays, it also has several other touch points, such as the sneaker bar, which generally is all about personalization. Another thing to note in the space, although it's not visually represented here, the space is also fully digitally enabled. So by using the Nike app, so this essentially enables customer to scan and try, shop seamlessly, and provide instant checkout options as well. We would say in our industry as experiential designers, we would say this store or Nike in general is one of the perfect example of how digital tools enhance the overall user journey, moving beyond the physical space. In addition to shoe products and all the sport retail, if you guys are familiar, Nike also has a running app and also the Nike training app, or they call it NTC. So this kind of like shows that Nike, beyond the typical retail and selling products and services, they are kind of like owning the fitness and sports market. So that's how they're trying to increase the market share by therefore increasing people that are actually into sports. So all of this, well, obviously are retail spaces. So first of all, what is a retail space? So architecturally and programmatically, it is a space that are meant to sell, showcase, or present products and services from a specific brand or retailer. Again, traditionally as architects and designers, we would think about interiors, fixtures, visual merchandising, and product presentation. However, if we take a step back and look beyond just the physical space, kind of like broaden our horizon beyond our expertise, we would realize that there's a lot more to consider that involves thinking beyond what it can look like, but also consider what would be the retail experience for the end users. So for today, what we'll be tackling would be the key and essential points that at least our studio is implementing, and key principles on creating retail experiences, which overall kind of like dictates the design of our retail stores. So the first word that you would hear throughout the entire presentation would be experience. So first, we define what is an experience. So it could be, well, based on Google, it's something that, which leaves, it's essentially an event that leaves an impression on someone. It could involve physical experiences or emotional, but to simply define, it involves our emotions and how we feel about a certain event that happened at any given time of our lives. Hence, it is always something that we would remember, be it good or bad, and it's always gonna be tied to our memories. That's why it's when we're designing spaces, going beyond just retail program, we should always think about the experience of the customer. I remember one of the talks of this same segment from Adar. She mentioned about designing with empathy, which correlates to basically the entire idea of thinking from the user point of view, and the experiences that they would perhaps have in the spaces. We could also say that experience is holistic. So it cannot be just from a single factor, but it can influence by others as well. So it involves our senses, the things we see, the things we hear, the things we touch and interact with. All of this contributes to our overall experience. Hence, in retail design, we can say that there should be a broader consideration as well that we need to think of. Instead, we need to think of in terms of the design process instead of just focusing solely on the physical space. So later on, after this session, my CEO team Kobe will be sharing more in depth with regards to the concept of return on experience and how it essentially leads to business outcomes. Okay, so one core design philosophy of 8 Inc. is, regardless of project type, is the idea of putting your people at the center. And by putting them on the center, we should look at them beyond just the usual demographic and the usual psychographic segmentation. And around it, you have your 4 experiential realms that connects them to the brand values. people then connect these brand values via the experiential realms through the touch point. So touch point, as a loose definition, would be anything that a customer would interact with the brand, whether it's physical, digital, products or services, packaging, whatsoever. As long as it has a direct interaction with the customer, it's considered a touch point. Now, in retail principle, people will buy things emotionally and justify it rationally. A lot of us will buy out of impulse. A lot of us will buy out of something that just because we saw it or we felt attracted to it, and then later on we'll justify why did we spend, let's say, $1,000 for an iPhone or more than that. But then if you would think about it, the reason sometimes is because of that entire experience within the retail space. And people, take of note, would be the first one to drive word of mouth through direct experience. Hence, it is always important to deliver the best possible engagement and express the brand values through these realms holistically and then directly to the people. So if you would look at other brands, they tend to hire influencers. And most of the time, these influencers doesn't even they don't even necessarily believe on what the brand is selling. But then if you would imagine someone like, an advocate of, for example, the Apple brand, he or she could be a direct ambassador of the brand to other people because he's taking it from his own experience from the brand itself. And then I guess to just go through in detail for each of the slides, we would start with the environments realm. So environments realm, well, obviously this covers the physical realm or touch points that our customers interact with physically. So in architecture sense, it could include the architecture itself, the interior design of the space, the spatial design, and specifically for retail projects, it includes visual merchandising, any customized fixtures that you may or may not have in the space. And lastly, if you're doing a global or national rollout, this could include also the modular components. Next is the communication. So this tackles how the brand talks to the customers. How do we communicate to them? How does the visual graphics represent the brand personality? So usually people will think that brand identity is just the logo, but then it actually carries a lot of other things under its wing. So for example, brand identity includes the values, the purpose, the vision, and the mission as well. But then it also includes the physical manifestation of these branding elements through collaterals. In the retail, it includes packaging. If you have digital touch points in the space, it could also include the UX and the UI and essentially the overall user flow of the touch point, as well as the website, the marketing visual. So all those billboards that you see in EDSA, in theory, those should be part of the entire retail journey. And then lastly, some clients would also have uniform design as well as the overall tone of voice of their marketing communications. And then we have the products and services. So this is something that's directly influenced by the brand itself. So what do they offer? What do they sell? What makes them unique? And lastly, how does the brand express their values to the types and services that they offer? So usually Apple, Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, all of them kind of like sell shoes. But then normally one brand or all of them would have something differentiated that you would associate the brand to the products. For example, you know that when you're purchasing an Ultra Boost, you know it's Adidas. When you're purchasing Pegasus, you know it's Nike. So those are the kind of like the differentiating factors when it comes to the product and services. And lastly, and I think one of the most overlooked aspect of retail design would be the people, or in our film, we call it the behavior. So how do we deliver the other realms to our staff and their interaction with the people? How do they behave in specific instances and moments within the user journey? How do we define the roles and responsibilities? And lastly, how do we express our identity to our people and human interaction? So imagine you have a really nicely designed retail space, and then once you enter, the staff will be following you around. Not everyone is comfortable having that interaction. But however, so if you would look at it, once the customer felt a bit off in the staff and the interaction with the people, be it in customer service or be it face-to-face interaction, chances are they would despise the brand no matter how good their space looks like. So again, essential component is the people would kind of like bring anything that you design to life, and that they will be the ones to communicate it with the direct customer. Now, again, to summarize, all these realms directly influence a person's interaction within the brand. Hence, we need to consider all of this in creating retail experience. Hold on, I think. Okay. Now, in every project, it is important to identify what is your why. So it defines your brand's relevance. It defines why do you exist. And this sets the brand's foundation and the outcomes that you would provide to your consumer. So if anybody here is familiar with Simon Sinek, he had this TED Talk a few years ago, and he explained how Apple seems to have something so different, but yet in theory, it's also a tech company like Microsoft and IBM. So according to him, the key idea was every organization knows what they do, and some of them knows how to do it, but very few knows why they do it. What's the purpose? Again, according to him, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. In a nutshell, he's encouraging brand to sell the aspiration rather than the features and functions. So of course, it might be a different case if you're talking to someone that's really tech geek. So he may or may not actually care about how many gigs of RAM is there in an iPhone or how many storage of memory. But then if you sell the aspiration of, by buying Apple, you could create this kind of content. You could connect to your families. You could connect to a wider range of network. Then if you're looking at that from that perspective, what it would be for the end user, then chances are you're gonna have the sale, or you're gonna close the deal. So again, in human experience, we should always think about why is it, or why are we doing it for them. And then oftentimes as well, maybe some of you have experienced this in other projects. Clients will approach us with the tactics, just because everyone else is doing it or they've seen it from a competitor. So for example, there's a telco shop that would approach us and say, hey, I want something like an Apple Store, or I want a big digital interactive screen within my space, or perhaps just because AR and VR is in at the moment, I want something like that in my space. And the list goes on. However, most of them doesn't have any clear strategy on what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve in the first place. So chances are by looking at these tactics from day one, you would end up with things that are not really relevant for your target customers. Now, in creating retail experiences, we should always start by defining the human outcomes. So this fundamentally sets your why. Without this in mind, chances are you will be lost in the tactical aspect of the design as mentioned earlier, leading to an experience that is either gimmicky or not relevant or not even sustainable. So for example, a retail client will ask you, I want a co-working space in my retail shop just because I want to be different. It might be sustainable from the first month, but then after that, if they don't have any clear strategy on what they're gonna do with that space, or it's not part of their entire design thinking, that co-working space or that event space, chances are will be just converted to another showcase of products and services. So that essentially is a wasted investment in a way. And then after understanding these outcomes, we then need to devise a strategy. So the strategy will then define what are the key principles or your touch points from the physical space, the tone of voice, how your staff behaves, and the products and services that will make your retail brand stand out from the rest of the competition. And then lastly, what are the tactics that will deliver the human outcomes based on the strategy that you've identified? And essentially, these are the tangible solutions that will make the experience come to life. So oftentimes, again, as designers, and most of the time our clients as well, will come up with a design in our head and rationalize it why later on. I mean, I'm not saying everyone, but most of us are, myself included, is guilty of that. It's always very tempting to jump into the creative solutions, like, okay, I want my space to look like this, I want this wood finishing, blah, blah, and the list goes on. However, we should always remember that design is meant to solve problems, not just look at how it looks like in the perspective of our visual satisfaction. Now, if we apply this to a creative process, and similarly is what we do at 8, we would then start by discovering and understanding the brand itself. So from the values, the customers, and the offerings, and perhaps even key competitors, if there's any existing case studies, trends and technology, and sometimes it's a whole lot of research just to digest what the brand is all about. Oftentimes, you will also be working with another management consulting agency like McKinsey or Bain to identify all these other factors that might affect the retail program. For the existing case studies and the competitors, it's always advisable to look beyond just your retail category. So meaning if you are asked to design a car showroom, you're not supposed to just look at what the others are doing, like, from a point of view of a car showroom, because chances are you will just replicate what they're doing. You will just copy and somewhat improve what is already there. However, the chances of differentiation would be minimal because you're kind of like constraining yourself into that industry. So why not look at hospitality? Why not look at how Apple does it, or even other brands? How can you make a different interaction by achieving the same outcome? So by doing so, you're kind of like broadening your horizon, and chances are you will be able to come up with something that will stand out from the rest of your competition. Now, next is essentially, as designers, we cannot come in and pretend that we know everything just because we're designers. One key important thing is working with key stakeholders to create the framework, because at the end of the day, it's their brand. We're just here to help them extract and remind them of the values, but then we shouldn't be the one defining it for them. And it's also important to work with them in terms of what do they want to achieve as a human outcome, as well as the experiential outcomes, which will essentially lead to the business outcomes and success. This would guide us in creating the desired experience from the end users within the lens of the brand outcomes, the values, and the experience principles. And next on the creative process is essentially creating an experience blueprint, or what we call sometimes an experience journey, detailing the key moments within the retail experience. So usually we would only consider the journey within the space, like, okay, I'm in the shop front, then I enter, what will be the first step? But then enable for you to create a more meaningful engagement with your customers, it is always advisable to look beyond just a physical space, rather looking at from a holistic experience journey point of view. So what does this mean? So meaning you should always think of interacting with them even before entering the store, or even before they consider buying your product. So this could include like marketing collaterals, similarly to what I've shown earlier in the communications portion. That's why all those other marketing visuals, the website, the mobile phone interface, all of those are essential to be kind of like holistic to what you're doing in the physical space. And then once you're in the space itself, this is where your people will come to the picture. This is where architecture will do its part to create that experience within the space. And then lastly, when they bought your product, they went home, we call that post-purchase. It is advisable not to stop the interaction there. So you still have, the digital app that perhaps could suggest meaningful products to them later on, or sometimes even by just merely improving your after-sales service. So it doesn't mean na nabentahan mo na sila, the relationship ends there. Ideally, you should create a cycle from pre, during, and post-purchase. Now, this would also help us consider our touch points to be more meaningful, and at the same time be relevant to the entire customer journey that we've already designed for them. And then lastly, after identifying these principles and touch points, we can then proceed to our typical design, documentation, and build, which I'm sure everyone here is all aware of. This could include your typical architecture and spatial design of the retail space, up to the development of communications, touch points, and behavior model. So the key takeaway is that retail design is beyond just designing forms and zonings again, but rather it's a strategic process that ensures that what we do is built around the brand values and the outcomes based on the thoughtfully created experience blueprint. Because after all, as a reminder, retail experience or retail design in general should not be just a beauty contest of what store looks nicer. It should be about what we make them feel by engaging with the brand across all the experiential realms. Now, okay, everyone's familiar with this brand, but if we look at a closer look at Apple retail experience, we can see how everything seamlessly works together. So from the retail environment on the leftmost side portion of the slide, up to the graphics, the packaging, as well as the website, the mobile interface, and its people. So recently, during COVID situation, they won't just allow everyone to enter the store. They would sometimes ask you to book an appointment or at least pre-select which products you would want to check out within the store. Sometimes they would even ask you, are you buying or are you just shopping around? The reason being is that once you enter the store during your appointment, the staff already knows that you are here to view the new iMac or to view the new iPhone. Hence, they could kind of like usher you to that specific area within the space. Of course, after that, you could just freely roam around. But then the idea is that they're already engaging with the customers even before they enter the space. So again, looking at these samples, we could somewhat distinguish how the Apple brand is different between Samsung or Xiaomi on this, and how these touch points seamlessly works together, and the way you experience the space complemented the image of the Apple brand, which is just making it easy for everyone. And then if we take a closer look at the retail environment in this one image alone, you could see that again, oftentimes architects would focus on the retail space, the architecture and the interiors. However, if you look at this, it also has several components like the environmental graphics, the visual merchandising, the in-store communications. So in-store communication means literally the text that's on the table, the pricing, the model, blah, 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 all those typography, all of those becomes part and parcel of the entire retail experience. And lastly, the staff and its uniform. So this adds to the entire cohesiveness of the entire retail experience, which essentially leads back again to Apple's brand image of being simple, being straightforward, and being direct to the point. Now, over the past years, 8 Inc. have worked on several retail projects such as Globe Generation 3, as mentioned by Archie earlier. The China office worked on Xiaomi in Shenyang, as well as Shaguanti in I cannot remember which city in China. And then lastly, Airtel in India, applying the same principles of creating retail experiences through a holistic approach. However, for today, I'd like to quickly share one of the projects that we've completed sometime in 2020, just before the pandemic. And for those who have attended the previous Archi Hustle session, I've also presented this case study. So the brand is, we call it CPS, or they call it CPS Chap. So it's essentially a local Thai clothing brand similar to Pen Shop and Bench. And the brand is well known for the jeans, not for the shirt, but for the jeans. And also for the design and quality of it, as well as somewhat they made a connection to the rock and roll community. So as part of the brief, they approached us to do a retail experience. Number one is to modernize and focus on the brand's legacy, while at the same time keeping in touch with the younger customers. So one of the key challenges that they had kasi before was they're facing a diminishing customer base, especially on the younger audience, because the brand was seen as someone that my mom or my dad would buy because of the jeans. I mean, because of course, during the time of my mom and my dad, it was the famous brand. But then now, younger kids, they may just go for H&M, Uniqlo, and those basically fast fashion brands. So similar to the process shared earlier, we've identified the experience framework that guided our team in creating the next CPS experience. So from the lens of the customer outcomes on the left versus the brand's core purpose and values. So here we've identified iconic, influential, and bold, and sophisticated. And then ultimately laddering down to what are the principles that will define the CPS experience in terms of the physical space, the communications, the products and services, and lastly, the behavior. And now, after translating the principles of the visual expression of the retail experience, we would see how everything, well, at least visually ties together. But then later on, I'll share how all of this works together as one holistic experience. So here's an overview of the retail environment and zoning based on the outcome of several rounds of our collaboration with the client side and how they would want their brand to be experienced through their spaces and physical touch points. So as you could see, the layout is clean and simple. It's almost symmetrical. We introduced a few things like the iconic box, the show lounge, because essentially the brand wants to focus on showing your style and again focusing on the legacy. So hence in our programming, we considered creating a specific zone just for the jeans alone and making it part of the shop front. Hence, it's going to be part of the shop identity moving forward. And then in terms of the spatial look and feel, it generally focuses on creating a clean and honest space, thereby giving more focus on the products and making it the hero of the space. Again, as mentioned earlier, we've also focused on the legacy that the brand was known for, which essentially is the jeans. And this is to remind the people of its origins and staying true to their core strength, but at the same time ensuring a new engagement for the customers. So in this specific view, you would see that we created that, we call it the iconic legacy box that focuses solely on this product. And we've also added a few touch points in terms of personalization, which eventually ladders back on their idea of championing and empowering self-expression through fashion. And then we've also created an open storefront, so no barriers, no glazing, no doors, just to make it more welcoming and transparent. So the nearby stores, actually all of them is your traditional retail space with glazing and shop fronts. However, for CPS, what we did was we kept it open, and then as mentioned earlier as well, we positioned the iconic box to be part of it. So once you had the chance to visit the space, you would normally think that the iconic box is basically part of the mall itself as a sculpture rather than part of this retail space. And generally, this communicates the unique expression and the rebel attitude, which essentially stands out from the rest of the typical shop fronts within the same space. And also, depending on your client and the scale of your project, we've also looked beyond just the actual site. And we've conceptualized a new retail ecosystem that identifies what format is relevant depending on the market and on the location. So from the flagship site, which is what you guys have seen earlier, down to the standard stores, which focuses generally on more sales and quantity rather than being experiential, down to the smaller formats such as the kiosk and pop-up, thereby creating these different types of scale within the retail environment. And most importantly, what is the role of the digital tools such as the website and the mobile interface in creating the overall experience journey? And then zooming in again into the physical components, part of this was creating different, we call it Kiro parts, which will enable the creation of the different retail formats that was shown earlier. So by standardizing these components based on the retail experience strategy, enables us to create a consistent look and feel while keeping the functionality relevant for each of the site. And lastly, in terms of business perspective, which most of the clients would of course take into consideration, this would ensure the efficient use of real estate, meaning for a specific site, be it small or big, they will be able to pick and choose the specific components based on the market demand and location. So meaning they don't need to reimagine another store experience just because the site is smaller, but rather they could pick up what component would be relevant for that specific site and size. Now, in terms of physical communications, how do we express the retail brand through its packaging, environmental graphics, and wayfinding? So we essentially took the same cues from the physical space and came up with the proposed typography, brand colors, and brand application, which reflects, again, the rebel attitude of the physical space. So if you could see, you have the normal Helvetica font, but then there's some highlights of playful regular patterns that will be implemented within the packaging itself. And then similarly for the digital product browsers, which is part of the retail space, as well as the visual merchandising down to the price tags and the hangers that was used within the retail store. And of course, lastly, one of the most important aspects of retail experience design would be creating new roles to support the new experience. So for this specific project, we came up with basically transforming the role of a typical salesperson into a stylist that could perhaps help you create your own style, or perhaps a store guide or a fit crew that's a bit knowledgeable about fashion rather than the normal staff. And then a style curator that essentially updates the product catalog as well as the visual merchandising within the space. And lastly, a team leader, which essentially manages the day-to-day operations. As of today, we're still continuing the retail rollout. We just finished 3 stores last few months ago, and then we have 3 more upcoming in 2021 using the same concept and the same kilo parts. Now, during the last Archie Hustle session, there was a lot of questions about what's next. Part and parcel was because it was the height of the pandemic, especially now that there's a big hesitancy, at least on engaging in a physical retail environment, given that social distancing and all these restrictions. So first, we should think physical and digital. So as we all know, there's already a shift from just a purely physical engagement to a fully digital or hybrid of both. The pandemic actually accelerated the adoption of this in terms of other brands, but nonetheless, one thing is certain, the customer journey will just continue to evolve further over time. But then again, we don't need to choose between going physical or going digital, but rather we should always think of ways on how we could complement the space and the experience by using both of these touch points all together and work together as a holistic experience. I'm sure you guys have heard about Facebook changing its name to Meta. So that's another trend that's actually upcoming. So the all this metaverse fad, although we don't know yet how it would work in terms of technical aspect, in terms of retail design, but we would then expect a lot more transformation when it comes to retail experiences once all of these are solidly figured out. And then again, in relation to the first point, as we shift to a more digitally enabled interactions, how do we redefine the role of the physical store? So how do we envision the physical stores to be relevant, and how do we see them fitting the ever-changing customer journey? So again, we should think beyond just the normal visual merchandising, the normal product display, but rather how do we engage through more thoughtful experiences as well as brand representation within the physical space. And lastly, and one of the most important point is how our customers will experience our retail spaces, or be it a different project, or be it a bank or whatever. It will always be the representation of what your brand is. Hence, it's always important to create memorable moments and experiences around what our customers need, and think of essential ways of making sure that we connect to them beyond just the normal transactional notion, but then something beyond deeper, and if possible, we foster irrational loyalty. And of course, as a closing remark, after all, better experiences will essentially lead to better business outcomes, be it on the brand image point of view, to customer retention and acquisition, and eventually leading to word of mouth that will be used as a marketing tool for your brand. Okay, so yeah, I think that covers everything. Any questions?
All right. Genry,
Yep.
thank you very much for that presentation. Medyo ang daming detalye. Parang more talaga designing retail experiences. Ang nakuha ko dyan, it's parang wala tayong masyadong design, architectural, ganyan na discuss. Pero really more on the front end work before you even draw a line no? Parang ganun ang dating Ay, PP Bench, ano nangyari?
Medyo mind blown. I mean, I saw the presentation last nung Archie Hustle natin. Pero parang meron pa rin mga bagong napupulot
Oo, exactly.
Parang gusto ko na ngang bumalik magtrabaho na
Grabe ka naman. Magaling na tayo na maging retail designers. Pero yun, I guess sa chat ba meron tayong questions? Check ko lang
I guess i-add ko lang din, Archie. Hindi siya, again, yung designing from an outcome point of view should not just be limited to retail. I mean, if you would imagine,
correct.
Okay, it doesn't necessarily reflect the views of UAP, but then if you would imagine policies being designed around that, then yeah, I think there's gonna be a more meaningful conversation, and of course other projects as well. The thinking about of course taking into consideration other aspects like environmental and sustainability, but then thinking of what's gonna be the meaningful outcomes of the things that we do. Therefore, we're ensuring that what we design actually solves a problem.
Yeah. Tama, hindi lang tama. Parang piggybacking on what you said earlier, it's not a beauty contest. No, the store might look super simple, but the experience that they deliver is unforgettable. Kanina mo pa sinasabi, naalala ko yung quote ni Maya Angelou, di ba? Parang, syempre ginugol ko yung buong quote. Para hindi ako magkamali. Kaya, yung quote ni Maya Angelou na people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel.
Yes. Yes.
Diba? So, kahit medyo, like you said, it's yung example mo is CPS. It's a local Thai brand. But if they deliver the experience well, I'm sure they will be remembered better than yung talagang mga branded international names. Diba?
Yeah,
Yun.
pati ako, parang gusto ko yung medyo iba yung appreciation ko ngayon yung sinabi mo, Genry, na yung people have to be included. Parang they have to be one with the ano ba tawag doon? Sa theme, sa voice, sa message na gustong ipadala ng brand. Kasi, di ba, parang kung hindi sila included doon, parang putol eh.
Yep.
Baka sa kanila napuputol yung message, sayang. So that's one. And then yung second is, after point of purchase, di ba, dapat continuous yung touch points with the buyers, with the customers, with the people. Which is, sa akin ngayon, very, iba yung dating because the past few months, when the first time I heard your talk, Genry, iba naman yung trabaho ko noon, iba yung project ko noon. Ngayon, iba rin. So now I'm in mass housing. And parang it articulated a lot of the stuff na we want to execute. Kaya pala siguro gusto namin to. I mean, I'm sure we have to go back to a lot of other, kasi yung initial point, yung why, yun nga, hindi naman namin tinatanong yun minsan. So now, with this new question that we want to answer, di ba? Hopefully, we can come up with better designs for our clients. So this is mass housing. So this is parang majority of the Filipino people.
Yeah, tama. Yung why mo dati, IPP, why? Kasi mas mura. Ganun.
Oh, why? Kasi, why? Because there is a backlog, di ba? So, when I started in mass housing, 2.5 million backlog daw. Ngayon, 6 million na daw eh.
Ay, tumataas pa.
Yeah, tumataas every year because the industry only produces around 300,000 units. So that's Camellia, your SMDC, and growing at what? Mga 5%. So there's really a problem. There's really a demand. Di ba? So
market.
Before, kung sino lang makaproduce faster, cheaper, yun na yun. Pero the experience na nabibigay natin sa buyers, sa mga Pilipino who can afford it, di ba? Yun na yun. Kumbaga, hindi masyado thought through.
Tama.
Pero
Yun yung
ganda,
cookie cutter
ganda.
na lang. Cookie cutter na lumalapas. Kaya ganun yung tsura ng mga housing natin eh. Ayun. Ako, I have a question, Genry. Kaya nabanggit mo regarding the creative process. Si Genry biglang naging seryoso pag madali lang to.
Malay na ako eh.
Dali lang to. Creative process. Tapos, din sa part ng discovery. And you said earlier na you should look beyond your category.
Yeah.
Diba? Question, have you ever worked on a project na you introduced a different perspective to the client na parang, baka medyo risky to, baka hindi natanggapin kasi talagang way out of the normal store na competitor nila yung dati. Have you ever done that?
For me personally, I mean, at least on my experience on it, I was part of, well, not really so much, but then we used to do this Lincoln 2.0 retail. I mean, essentially a car showroom in China. So normally, if you would approach a car showroom, right, parang, okay, andun mga kotse mo, ganun. Tapos, andito si agent, dito pupuin ka sa circular table na may apat na chairs, and then mag-usap kayo. However, yung Lincoln brand kasi was Ford's luxury brand in China, and it was market entry doon sa China. So previously when I joined it, they were working on a project on how to reintroduce Lincoln to the Chinese market. Well, we all know China has a lot of billionaires, and a lot of people who would actually support the brand. So the simple logic was, if you're paying for that amount of money for a car, might as well your experience also reflects the same. But then we all know that typically car showrooms doesn't show that, even though it's BMW, even though it's the high end brands. So what they did was they introduced the element of hospitality to the project. So when you enter, if I'm not wrong, mayroon kang host, mayroon kang dadalhin ka sa room, and then even we've introduced the personalization studio. So it's basically a customized touch table with all the bespoke materials from the leather seat, and then you could visually see the car being updated in the 3D rendering based on the materials that you select. And then what's interesting was the handover. So I'm not a car owner yet, so I don't know how handover works. But then just basing on pictures that I'm seeing online, they would hand over the keys,
susi.
yung susi nakaganon.
Oo, yung malaking susi.
Tapos may pati.
Okay.
Anyway, yung sa Ford, what they did was they created a lounge, and then once you are, like merong area dun sa lounge na yun na nandun yung kotse, parang may grand reveal siya.
Oh, wow.
Andun siya sa lounge.
Nice.
Yeah, and then even the fact that if you're gonna send your cars for servicing, meron siyang parang viewing glass, and then you could see your car being serviced down there. So
wow.
I mean, it's a simple trick. I mean, to be honest, a lot of people are introducing hospitality to retail spaces, and just look at banks. Most of them, at least in Philippines, is not officially accepted yet. But then if you look at banks in Thailand, SCB has investment lounges. It has premium spaces just for customers. And what does it tell you? If you're gonna look at the typical banking experience, chances are you're gonna have a counter. But then for them, the way they position it as a co-working space or as a lounge, eventually changes the game already. So the process now is, the challenge is how do you take it further? So that's why in telcos as well, instead of having for Globe, to be honest, Globe Gen 3, if you would compare it to the trends nowadays, it's already a bit outdated because it's been 5 years. But then, so the question is, what's next? So if you look at the touch points in Singapore, they have manless cubicles, or they have yung StarHub stores nila, they have a big screen with seating hooks around, which essentially resembles an interaction within a co-working space. So again, you kind of like translating the experience based on the best possible experience, not only limited to category. Because again, chances are, if for example Lincoln would just look at let's say a BMW or Merc, they would do the same, just better finishing siguro. But again, looking beyond the category, diba?
Tama.
Yeah.
Tama. It's more about
Genry, in relation to that, parang the way I see your process, parang holistic yung approach, di ba?
Yep.
So, in a, let's say, pie chart natin yan, gaano kalaki ang impact ng architecture, or like when do you guys come in? Or parang hindi na ba arkitekto ang nagli-lead nito?
Actually, no. In a way, it's actually a good question. Kasi a lot of you might be thinking, how did I ended up doing this? Kasi in a nutshell, hindi siya purely architecture. Now, the way we work, maybe I would say a bit as well on what 8ing does, is we're more like a strategic design consultant, which we have, strategists, we have architects like myself, we have graphic designers, we have digital developers. But then, in the beginning of the process, all of the leads will be part and parcel of the people driving the project. Lalo na kapag the project is specifically, ang end product na is more on architecture touch points, then it's important to have that purview in the beginning. So now, if your question about what's the role of architecture, well, architecture delivers that experience through the physical space. So meaning, all of the things that we will design as architects, we would then need to consider what are the outcomes before that. Because again, I might give you a nice lounge, but then if it doesn't serve any purpose, it's just a wasted element of the space.
Correct.
Right? So all of this would be coming in terms of the end process. So if you would ask me, normally, the discovery and all those things in the beginning takes about 20% of 20 to 30% of the entire process. Another 10 goes to the blueprint, meaning the journey. How does it happen at every single point, and what would be the trigger, or what would be the touch points being used. Is it a physical, is it a digital touch point, or is it the people? So all of those then will be designed specifically after that phase, which doon na papasok yung, syempre, may fundamentals ka na ng visual language. You have the fundamental principles of what your touch point would look like. Then you would go to concept design, and then the usual process, the concept, schematic, design development, all the way to construction, essentially delivering it on the physical space. Now, the same thing for digital. You need to develop an app, but then you need to figure out the UX and UI. All of those has already been figured out in the beginning. So it's just purely execution. Yeah. I guess the logic is, before we jump into the detail, there's a whole lot of things that needs to be considered to make sure that, number one, it's relevant. Kasi especially if you're dealing with corporations, they would always think about when is my return of investment, diba? So that's why you cannot come up with something that won't serve a purpose, won't add value to what you stand for. Yeah. And later on, yeah, I think my CEO, I saw him coming in Zoom. He would be detailing, I would assume, a lot of things about return on experience as well. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Kasi yun nga, if we design a space na hindi connected, iba yung message ng touch point. Actually, baka nakakasira pa sa brand.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yan.
I think we have a lot of questions na, no?
Oh, yeah. Let me just read one. Ito galing sa ating district director kay Arctic Marcelia Arce Ignacio. I think this is also related to the question ni Bench kanina, no? So her question is, around how long did you immerse yourself, or how long did you prepare before you actually sat down and started working on your design, specifically when you design for CHAPS, CPS?
CPS CHAPS. Okay. If I remember correctly, we did, I think, 2 to 3 weeks of just discovering, understanding the brand, and then 2 to 3 weeks of, basically working with them closely. And then the blueprint comes around 6 to 8 weeks. I understand some of you might be concerned of the timing, but then you should always highlight the value. You see, so kasi other people will tend to, okay, I need my retail store to be up in 8 weeks. But then if you actually take a step back and look at the bigger picture, then yes, maybe not. They would be encouraged to do so. But yeah, but in a nutshell, that's normally the process, and that's what we did for CPS CHAPS.
3 weeks to 3 weeks to 3 weeks din. Yun ang natin facing. Okay, ano tayo dito? Medyo rapid fire tayo sa question. Okay. From Architect Cassandra Yap, President yata to ng Saga. So, what if the client is new to the industry and don't have a specific plan what they want for their brand? So basically, parang magsa-start pa lang, hindi pa nila alam kung saan sila pupunta. Do you end up suggesting a brand for them? To what extent?
Yes. Actually, first of all, hi Bianca. Bianca is my classmate in.
Ayan.
Yeah. So,
planted question yata to eh. Joke lang.
So okay, actually this is a good question. Yes, normally we would walk with them with the journey kasi it's basically a clean slate, which is much better than tying it up to something that's already existing. Because if you have something that is existing, you'll be facing challenges of legacy. Like there's gonna be OGs within the brand that you might need to convince on your idea. But then if it's a new brand, then it's essentially much better for us. So we used to work on a project which I cannot mention out of confidentiality. They're trying to introduce, it's basically a local brand on that country, but then they want to introduce it globally. So what we did was an entire refresh on how that brand will be communicated to the global market instead of what's being offered locally. So done from the branding, the tone of voice, visual communication elements, even to the retail store design, we came in and assisted them with that. Now, what we need to ask them is, again, what's your why? What's your outcome? Diba? Kasi it all essentially, they're the only ones who could tell you that. You could guide them, but then they're the only ones who could tell you that.
Goes back to the why.
Yeah, sort of the why. Like for them, their why was, again, if my memory serves me correct, they just want to champion that brand in relation to that country as well. Okay, it's just I cannot mention the country, but yeah, it's
hirap sumagot, no?
Yeah. So it needs to be represented globally, but then of course tying to the heritage. So yeah.
This one.
Right. Thank you very much for the
Goes
question,
back to the
Bianca.
why.
Oo, start with why. Simon Sinek. Bilhin niyo na yung libro ni Simon Sinek to start with why. And the next question, si Ryan, ating chapter mate. I like the holistic approach to architectural design. I'm just wondering, shouldn't the customer experience and final identity of the brand and the company come from the client? Were you actually presenting a sort of rebrand of the client's brand through architecture, or did your clients already give you a concept and brand identity before you came out with the final designs?
Okay, this question is somewhat relative to Bianca's question. Kasi
Yes.
it doesn't mean that we're rebranding them. No, it doesn't mean like that. Kasi at the end of the day, they have their own fundamentals. They have their vision. They have their mission. Now, you'll be briefed based on that, because sometimes even if a person within that brand has been there for a long time, chances are most of them would also be forgetting what they stand for. So you kind of like need to remind them, okay, based on your mission and vision, this is what you are, but then it doesn't reflect on the experience. So doon na tayo magkaaroon ng thought process na, okay, now we need to sit down and again align, is this what you want moving forward? But it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be, like rewriting everything specifically on the basics of the brand, because it's already been given. Now, depende din yun sa business outcome that they want to achieve. But then at the end of the day, lahat yung visual communications, lahat ng architecture is just a manifestation of what that new experience is based on the brief that was given to us.
So it's more of what I take from that is more of a realignment to the why again,
Yeah.
diba? I mean, it may get watered
Always
down throughout
remind them with the why. Always.
Yes, realignment.
Yeah.
Yan. Nalagyan ulit ng ano ba tawag sa construction?
Forma?
Yung nakalimutan ko yung Tagalog, ano ba yan? Arkitekto pa man din. Alright, next question. Ano to? Si ano pa rin to eh? Ayan. How would you convince clients to think more of the user experience versus the profit they will make by maximizing the retail spaces?
Okay, this is okay. To be honest, this is the normal question that we would be facing. Yeah. So later on, Team Kobe, hi Team. So we'll be talking about return on experience and how it essentially generates return on investment. Because again, as mentioned earlier, right? Profit is one thing. Profit is already the outcome of what you do, but then it's not necessarily the reason why you're doing such things. So imagine, parang ano kasi siya, more on promise versus profits. But then of course, profit is already given. But then usually if it's really someone that, for example, cannot afford, because I think I saw one question earlier about yung mga maliliit na customers na probably cannot afford the entire spectrum. That could also work. Pero again, ang fundamentals lang nun was, again, you need to remind them of what they stand for. Now, if at least on the baseline, deliver on that through, maybe for now, it's just a retail space. But then before that, remember the blueprint. The blueprint is already designed for you to create those things in the future. For now, if the problem is only the physical space, then fine, we'll tackle that. But then don't forget that later on, if we choose to engage someone or even us to do the entire spectrum, then we already have the blueprint. So make sure that you just tie it back to there. You don't need to take everything to take everything naman eh. So irregardless, the process is still very scalable. But then the main notion is, how do you translate the why to the blueprint?
Yeah.
This one.
Okay. Question pa ba? Ano? Ako may question ako. Okay. Like, sige, ito muna na. Tanong muna. Sige.
Haba nito.
Aba.
Ito yung sinabi ni Genry yata na
Yeah,
sa
yung
small
maliliit
times
na
ba?
business.
Yeah. Hi Genry, great presentation. This is a great process to incorporate in our practices. But the question is, how can we offer this to smaller businesses or yung mga hindi afford yung ganitong services that we can offer? Minsan meron ng working structure yung brand, pero the way we can see it, in a designer's perspective, it needs updating. This is beyond architecture, which is great, pero not all clients can see through this process.
Oh yes.
Minsan ayaw nila pakialaman mo yung business strategies nila eh.
No, that's true. I mean, to be fair, it is true. It's really true. But then again, as mentioned earlier, you need to understand essentially where they're coming from first. Okay. Kasi sabi ko nga earlier, we cannot just come in and act as if we know everything. Kasi at the end of the day, it's their brand, it's their business. But then of course, we're here to guide them, making sure that they're doing the right thing. Diba? Kasi iba naman yung sasabihin mo na ganito yung brand promise, ganito yung strategy mo. Pero hindi mo kailangan pakialaman yung part and parcel, but then you just need to remind them, okay, imagine what was that show, Hell's Kitchen ba yun? Wait, yung kay Gordon Ramsay yung Kitchen Nightmares. Di ba usually sabi nila may mga ganun, pero later on kung paano ginagawa internally iba naman, di ba? So I understand may mga tao na naiinis pag ganun. But then ang to summarize, hindi naman kailangan to the point na papakialaman mo. Again, you just need to remind them on what they said they are doing, but then in reality, if they're not, then you need to remind them, hey, ganito ba talaga? Or may shift na tayo sa ganito. Then of course, tatanungin mo rin sa kanila, what's the end goal after this? If their goal doesn't align with what they're doing right now, then that's when you're gonna come in and remind them again that is this really what you want? Or because from the looks of it, your business strategy doesn't align with this anymore. So, syempre ano pa rin yun, it's still a very collaborative process. And then as a response dun sa hindi afford, again, it's all scalable. It's not necessarily that you would take everything. The important is you design the experience blueprint.
Yan.
Yeah, and mukhang yung buong process niyan takes a long time also.
Yeah.
Time and effort. Grabe yung time and effort. Ang narinig ko, Genry, para silang brand psychologist. Parang, diba, yung sinasabi mo ba, yung ginagawa mo, o kailangan natin
whisperer.
So, brand whisperer eh.
Hirap yung mga ngako ka, tapos di naman, di ba? Ganun.
Oo, tama. Dapat, tama, holistic eh. From the conception hanggang bumili sila, hanggang movie sila, dapat same message. Okay, I have a question, Genry. With sabihin natin COVID pandemic and everything, alam na natin yan. Everybody's moving into the digital space. Pero some people would still want a retail experience. Like let's say ako, sige, check muna ako sa internet or reviews ganyan, pero I'd still want to see the actual product. Diba? Parang sige, bago ako pumunta dyan, research muna ako dito. Bukas ba yung shop niyo ng ganito? So punta ako ganyan. So are you seeing these changes ba? And what strategies before are you implementing na binabago niyo na because of this change in the industry?
Well, to be honest, again, there's some products that you cannot go away from doing retail. Like for example, ako bibili ako ng sapatos, gusto ko sukatin muna.
Syempre.
So like even if I know that I'm US 9 on Nike, it doesn't mean I'm US 9 in Adidas, right?
Exactly.
But then that's the reason why I keep stressing earlier. You don't need to choose between either going physical or digital. It should be complementary, diba? Like for example, Uniqlo. Recently, I went to Orchard Central. They have this DIY. You know the UT range from Uniqlo where they have those collaboration prints. So again, in the baseline, they're still selling their products in the physical store. But then in online, sometimes they would have products that are there but it's not available in the store. And then another thing is that you could also do personalization. So yun nga, yung point ko about the UT personalization.
Yeah.
So that's one thing na you can introduce to improve the overall experience. Kasi you need to give them a reason to engage in the physical space. But then at the same time, not forgetting that everything is moving digital. Again, it's supposed to improve the overall experience but not necessarily like kill off the former. Diba? So in terms of trends, of course, minsan mas madali na ngayon yung kasi dati ang trend lang sa online was you're able to just view the catalog. You're not able to buy. But now, if you buy, sometimes you could even pick it up at a certain location. Yung parang merong fulfillment na within the journey. So doon pumapasok yung if you design the entire purchase journey before, during, and post-purchase, then doon mo makikita ano yung mga relevant value add na pwede mo pang ilagay doon sa entire journey mo.
Tama.
Diba? So hindi mo na kailangan pumunta sa store para kunin yung binili mo or something. Although I'm not sure which brand right now, pero yung iba kasi parang meron na silang parang pop-up station na you would just collect what you bought.
Tama. Tama.
Yeah.
Yung iba pa nga ginagawa pang parang gamified yung experience na only available in store eh. Parang makikita mo sa pero kailangan pumunta sa store para doon nabilin. Parang
that's why
strategy.
The notion of the metaverse thing, although I'm sure it's gonna be the talk of the next few months. We don't know what's up yet, but then for sure, some experiential brands would come up with things on how to utilize it once the technology is really up and running. Diba? So again, I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of that. There's still gonna be further development.
What's your feel on that? What's your feel on yung move ni Facebook sa metaverse is moving into VR, AI? What's your take on that?
Personally, I'm not a fan of VR because to me, experience should be simple. If you're asking me to wear something on my face just to experience something, I think I'll pass. Okay. However, if it's integrated properly within the entire experience, therefore you don't need additional layer. Diba sabi nga nila, if you need to explain design, chances are you did not design it properly. If you need,
Oh, wow. Client, here's my design.
Yeah. It's all about simplifying things. It's all about solving problems. Now, what we need to ask is, what is this metaverse solving to begin with? We don't know yet. That's why it's too early to judge, diba?
Tama.
So, yeah.
Pero interesting thing to watch out for this next few months. Yung move. Pati yung crypto, minention ni
Crypto?
Diba, minention din ni Zuckerberg eh. They're moving to NFT space eh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, pero yeah, it might be a different shift na naman, technology shift.
Pero major push, no? Biglang Facebook is going that direction. So I'm sure everybody's gonna be going that direction din. Ayan. I think meron pang question na pahabol. Last few questions na lang, Genry, and then we'll let you go. Saturday afternoon, baka
No, actually, I intend to stay until I think.
Sige, yeah, please, with Tim.
Right? I mean, do I
Yes.
need to stop? No.
Yes, please. Join us, please.
Okay.
Last few questions. Is it important to identify the percentage from retail space in the back area? If so, what's your recommendation? I guess more on space planning.
Space planning, of course. Kasi of course, new retail experience would mean new equipment, new interaction, new engagement. So that may or may not actually affect the size of your back of house. So this is all in relation to kasi usually sa immersion phase, they would tell you what they have right now. But then what they tell you, what they have right now, maybe not be the same thing that you'll be proposing after the process. So as designers, we should not still forget the spatial planning side of things. Because again, we need to deliver that. So therefore, once we are introducing new touchpoint, for example, simplest way is introduce an LED screen. You know for a fact that it needs a server. You know for a fact that it needs better internet or proper infrastructure. So again, all of those things again come as well as part and parcel of the entire design process.
Tama. Okay, last question. I think you touched upon this now already kanina, but I'll just read it again if you want to elaborate. Would you agree that this design approach can be applied to other typologies? Can you suggest some concepts and applications for other industries? For example, we should design houses according to the experience that we want when we go home or work from home, and not really on aesthetics.
Yes.
Medyo na-touch upan mo na to kanina.
Yeah. But actually, I think just to respond that quickly, okay, let's say the context of a house. Sometimes you would want to ask, what makes you feel at home? You would ask your client, what makes you feel at home? Because that answer might be different from him. That might be different from me. So, just by simple logic of ano yung nagpapakalma sa'yo or nagpapa-feel sa'yo na yung home, then start there. Start there kasi that would essentially identify what are the programs that you require to your houses. Kasi di ba merong houses na ewan ko sa inyo, meron naka-encounter na ba kayo ng parents na ayaw ng TV sa kwarto? Mga ganon. Kasi of course, kasi sa kanila, ang definition nila ng being at home is family gathering. Ang definition nila ng being at home is being out in the garden, connecting with my family members. So therefore, sometimes they would come up with this specific request. Siguro somewhat natatouch siya, pero hindi lang siya obviously what do you call this, mention. Kasi nga, pero if you would look at it, yun yung why nila, yun yung parameters nila kasi they're looking for that ideal experience that they would want in their own houses. Now, next, in applications to other industries. Okay, I'll give you one word answer for that. I started with human outcomes, right? Okay, how about Parex? Okay, that's it. End of story. So I won't elaborate on that. Is that
another session yan?
Is that centered on the outcomes or what? Yeah. Again.
What?
Nanood ka nung nung kay Adar saka kay Miss Choi.
Pinanood ko lahat yun hanggang kay AK.
Uy, astig. Tama naman, ating speaker, very active sa... Thank you very much, Genry. Nakakataba ng puso yan. So siguro ito na lang last, Genry, before we put you on a break and then let you go. Tanggalin na natin yung designing retail experiences. What would be your last message for everybody on the stream in designing experiences?
Well, last message, again, start with why are you doing things in the first place? Start with the outcomes that you want because yun yung magsiserve na guiding star mo talaga. Kasi madali namang, well, hindi ko sabihin madali, pero madali namang kasing mag-isip ng materials, madaling mag-isip ng detalye, madaling mag-isip ng it's always easy to do the spatial programming and architecture kasi it's there. You've been doing that for 10 to 20 years. Now, I guess the struggle is you need to justify why are you doing it in the first place. So again, I'm not trying to change the entire design process, but just making sure that we're designing for a purpose and we're designing to solve a problem, not just by design just for the sake of designing. Because it all ladders down to a lot of things: how you make people feel within the space, how the business side feel about what they're investing in terms of the physical build. So all of this kind of like ladders down. So once you have just proper justification on things, regardless of your project typology or project type, then I think I can confidently say you won't be lost. There's always something for you to guide you when you're lost in the process of what is relevant or not.
Yeah.
Nice. Still going back to the core of why you're existing.
Yeah.
Yan, great message, Genry. Thank you very much for spending this afternoon with us. We'll just put you on a break. Pero before we put you on a break, we'll present you with a e-certificate. Syempre through Zoom lang. Yan. Yung extra niyan, I think parating na or...
Yun ang hinihintay ko actually.
Antayin mo lang. Darating yan ang parts. Yan. So, basahin ko lang. The United Architects of the Philippines, Quezon City South Triangle Chapter issues this e-certificate of recognition to architect Genry Bonifacio Umali for sharing his valuable time, insights, and knowledge as a guest speaker with the title Designing Retail Experiences via live stream on Zoom meetings given this 30th of October 2021, signed by our chapter secretary Beverly Locsin and our chapter president Pons Tararemo. Genry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Genry.
Stay safe.
Hey.
I'll see you in the next session.
Yes, sir.
Drop off pa ba or?
Up to you. You can log in or log out, whatever. Maganda lang muna kami. Mag-break muna sandali. While,
tapos siguro thank some sponsors.
Because I think we miss online na rin, so. Yeah.
Sige.
All right.
Sige. Genry, thank you very much. See you in a bit.
Happy weekend.
All right. So
what's next, sir?
I think ang ating next speaker will be up on 3 p.m. So we'll be taking a little bit of a break. Pero with everyone here, we'd like to play actually before tayo mag-go to the next part of the program, we want to thank our sponsor again. Yan. Syempre, first sponsor natin, number 1, Poison. Maraming salamat kay Poison, the number 1 paint. Of course, our other sponsors, BITC, Roofing Materials. Yan. Si Foamy, yung nag-present last week. Gaganda ng materials niya. So, thank you, Foamy. Also, Starken, AAC. Mga...
Autoclave-rated concrete.
Yes, sir. Mga CHB. Hindi ba CHB yan eh? No? Hindi siya CHB. Pero parang ganun. Alternative to CHB.
Yes.
And of course, our returning constant sponsor, IPC Corp. And syempre, si Crown Pipes. Shout out kay Crown Pipes. Alright.
Nanonood yan si Boss Rodel. Thank you.
Oo, maraming salamat. So, next on our program, we'll play a sponsor video from BITC.
Alright. And then we'll be back at 3.
Balik tayo ng mga 3. Pero, 3. With our next guest, si Team Kobe. Ito na yung boss ni Genry. Kung medyo nakargahan tayo kay Genry ngayon, abangan niyo si Team Kobe.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
See you in a bit, guys.
Thank you.
Attention, architects, homeowners, and builders. In this video, you'll discover how to get top quality, premium roofing products, competitive prices, with the most unbelievable guarantees in the business. Hello, and welcome to Brian Isaiah Trading and Construction Inc., your roofing tile system specialist recommended by your fellow architects. Brian Isaiah Trading and Construction Inc., also known as BITC, is a corporation duly organized and existing under Philippine laws, registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, engaged in a specialized contracting and construction business of importation, sales, and installation of various kinds of roofing tiles, such as Cobra from Spain and Portugal, Shinto from Japan, UPVC roofing sheets, Tigola shingles from Italy, Rosser stone-coated from Korea, and artificial palm thatch. Cobra Tejas is the market leader in the manufacturing of ceramic tiles, concrete tiles, and components for roofs. Cazorla, with its design and functionality, this roof tile is suitable for roofs anywhere in the world. Logica Lusa, highly efficient in its water tightness performance, clay roof tile with a traditional profile, manufactured in H-cassette and plaster molds. Shinto is a mixture of a special clay with bone materials, making the weight of the tile about 20% lighter. Here are a few of our products. Ceram F flat is essential for the modern Japanese style and a true flat surface with a sharp design. Ceram F2 has an excellent water drip feature that is unlike the ordinary flat roof tiles. Ceram F3 is suitable to attract the Western and Japanese style houses. UPVC, APVC roof sheets are widely used in government buildings, factory warehouses, and residential projects. UPVC sheet is a new option for roofing and wall cladding construction, a real improvement from galvanized sheet. Some of our product features include linear thermal expansion, thermal and sound insulation, mechanical resistance, resistance to chemical and environmental agents, and we're environmentally friendly. Here are some of the reasons why BITC roof tiles work so well. Number 1, we have a great relationship with both our direct suppliers and our clients, which is why we've been in the business for the last 18 years. Number 2, we have a very unique practice because of our objectives, which are supply, service, and warranty. Number 3, the Brian Isaiah Trading and Construction Inc. is dedicated to your quality. Some of the main concerns that most architects and homeowners are looks, timeliness, and price. You're in the right place if, number 1, you're tired of delayed delivery. Number 2, you're tired of installation mistakes from other companies due to shortcomings that hurts you in the long run. Number 3, you want a premium plus product and expect the highest quality of work. Number 4, if you're a current home builder and want to install high-quality roof tiles to your prestigious projects, take a look at some of our recent clients and the support system that they have been able to take advantage of here. Certain roof tile products are warranted for up to 50 years. Incredible guarantees are also included on workmanships as well. BITC and Cobra are now offering a free trip to Spain and Portugal to visit their factory. Certain restrictions apply. We are now offering a free estimate to your roofing requirements. Simply send us your roofing plans so that we can give you our best offer.
Just run away with me, darling. We'll get real lost. We'll get real lost again. Just run away with me, darling.
right.
Okay.
Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the stream. Invite natin sa stream si BITC. Present na yung representative natin from BITC. Raise your hand, please. If you're there, so we can add you to the stream.
ITC, are you here?
Going once. Twice. All right. While waiting for BITC, let's just remind everyone that please kindly fill up the attendance form in our chat, so we can take care of your attendance and your CPD points will be validated. All right. I can't see anyone. Okay. Anyways. Again, everyone, we'd like to just remind you to please keep your cameras on and follow the format for your name. Another round of house rules to ease the validation of your attendance. Only the email address associated in your Zoom account and the one you entered in your registration form can enter the meeting. In the event of logging out due to intermittent connection or insufficient gadget power supply, please log back in using the same registered email address associated with your Zoom account. Use the official Arktoberfest events virtual background and strictly follow the standards naming as example as displayed. Number 3, you must be inside the Zoom meeting to be a valid participant. Facebook Live viewing is not a valid proof of attendance. Participants shall be prohibited from turning off their video or cameras. Please observe proper dress code. All right, all participants' microphones will be on mute during the speaker's presentation. The use of the reaction button and chat box is encouraged for engagement and interaction during the Q&A segment of our program. Certificate of attendance will be issued to those who completed the required Zoom log time and successfully passed 70% of the assessment exam, say PRC requirement, which is answerable within 24 hours after the event for all pre-approved CPD programs. In return to the support that our industry partners render through their sponsorships, participating to our event allows marketing-related materials and promotional tools to be shared to your email inboxes. And at last, the views and opinions of featured guests do not reflect the official stand and position of the United Architects of the Philippines and the Quezon City South Triangle chapter and its hosts. Si IP, nakamute ka ba? IPP?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. So, medyo kinakabahan na ako kasi. All right, everyone. Welcome to the second part of this afternoon's Arktoberfest Architecture Technology Festival in our last and fourth week. October. Grabe, parang nag-whiz by
It's been
lang yung
a fast 4 weeks.
Yes, very fast 4 weeks, full of new ideas, conversations, new knowledge, and a few dreams na fulfill.
Correct. But I'm especially looking forward to our final speaker. I'm actually a little starstruck to be part of this last session. So do we start already? It's 3 o'clock in my time.
Yeah. Yes, please. And I think Tim Kobe is already in our Zoom meeting, so I guess it's time to introduce our next speaker for this afternoon.
Okay, so it's my honor to be presenting our last speaker. Tim Kobe graduated with honors in environmental design from the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. He began working on world fairs, corporate exhibitions, special events with Herb Rosendahl and Associates and the American Broadcasting Companies in Los Angeles.
Okay, nag-respond. Tinatawag ko kayo ang speaker.
okay.
Sir Mark, sorry, driving na po kasi ako pero nakikinig po ako sa
Okay, mute, sir.
Can we
architect, sorry, hindi po
Yeah,
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
to continue, in 1982, he worked with Murray Gelberg in New York. Later, he moved to San Francisco to work on exhibition and retail design with the Burdick Group. In 1987, Kobe co-founded West Office Design Associates and was responsible for the master planning of museums and for the design of several international exhibitions. In 1991, as founding principal of 8 Inc., Kobe expanded the scope of the office to include architecture, both commercial and residential, retail and office design, exhibition, and product design and development. Many projects have received international design awards and have been published in Asia, Europe, and the United States. Tim Kobe has lectured about strategy, environmental and industrial design at the SEGD annual conference in San Francisco, Sibos, Osaka, World Architectural Festival in Barcelona and Singapore, Next Bank Asia, Hong Kong, Art Center College of Design, Pasadena, the California College of Arts and Crafts, San Francisco, the San Francisco Academy of Art, and at the IDSA Awards presentation. He has taught environmental and industrial design at the California College of Arts and Crafts and at the San Francisco Academy of Art. Tim is currently CEO of 8 Inc., with 8 global offices in Singapore, San Francisco, London, New York, Honolulu, Tokyo, Beijing, and Hong Kong. Tim is also a member of the Board of Trustees for the prestigious Art Center College of Design in Pasadena and is a chairman of the Academic Affairs Committee. So without further ado, we'd like to call up on screen or bring on screen Tim Kobe. Hi, Tim. Good evening.
Hello. Good evening.
Yeah, so what time is it over at your end?
Well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you. This is a great event, and I'm happy to be part of it. So thank you for the invitation. Very kind.
Thank you, Tim. So there'll be 2 of us to be help facilitate through your presentation. My name is Benj. I'm a former president of the chapter, and with me is Archie Tolentino.
Hi, Tim.
So go Archie.
So just to we didn't get a chance to meet you before this presentation, but just to give you a better picture of what to expect, I guess, this afternoon. Arktoberfest is a yearly event wherein, well, we most wanted to be meeting in person and have this presentation but while sharing a few round of drinks. So in a way, it helps fuel the conversation. It's a less formal format than a conference, just to say the least. It's supposed to be a free-flowing conversation between architects, designers, and probably students who are with us this afternoon. So that's basically the demographic of your audience this afternoon. And we already had Genry present before you. So in a way, the audience is warmed up for your next presentation. And I must say again, in behalf of our chapter, it's an honor to have you this afternoon as the last speaker of our whole month annual event. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. I was able to hear some of Genry's presentation, so I think he was doing a great job at communicating some of the core ideas behind what we do. So I know you've been in good hands. So anyway, happy to participate.
Sounds like Genry's gonna be having a Christmas bonus. So
or more work.
Or more work. There you go. So Tim, if you're ready, we're ready for your presentation.
Okay. Yeah. So today, what I put together is a discussion around, as Genry mentioned, the idea of return on experience, and this goes back to probably at this point more than 30 years of work in the design and architecture world, and the things that we've been able to learn and glean from that experience. As you mentioned, we have multiple studios around the world. I think now we're up to 10. But one of the things that we're probably the best known for is the Apple Retail Program. And we were fortunate enough when Steve Jobs returned to the company in 1997, he asked us to help him with some of the physical spaces for Apple. I submitted a white paper on why they should do the Apple Retail Program, and subsequently we started working on that. And we're now in our 24th year. So it's been a great run with Apple, obviously, but the approach that we've taken is this idea of focusing on human outcomes and focusing on the things that people get from interacting really with any type of design. So whether that is architecture, whether that is, product design, whether it's communications, it can be in many categories. But the focus is really on what is the experience that the user has and how can they derive value from that relationship. Just to briefly introduce our company, as I mentioned, I founded in San Francisco more than 30 years ago. But one of the key ideas here is that we are big advocates in believing that design can define human progress, that much of the things that have helped improve our world has come from creative minds, and it has come from creative execution. So I think that all of us on this call have an enormous responsibility to bring our talents to bear to help one another and to help improve things. And so that's been our premise since the beginning, and it's something that we are firmly believe. When we think about designing human experience, these three words, we can kind of break it down simply to understand it. And when we talk about design, most people think of design as something, what it looks and feels like. What is the form? But one of the things that we learned from Steve was it's not just that. And as Genry said in the previous presentation, that design has to have a purpose. Great design has to do things for people. It has to have impact in some way. And so again, I think it's responsibility of architects and designers to look at what it does for people as a core outcome of the work. The second part is the human part, and this goes back to why are we designing anything? And it's really we are in the service of others, and that our job is to help design things for people that can connect with them in meaningful ways. And some of the greatest architecture in history has been able to do that. The things that get remembered over time are the things that do that. And so this idea of the human component being understood, not just at a psychographic or demographic level, but understanding what are the more primitive things that drive human behavior. And so one of the things that we look at is, the limbic part of the brain is the part that has no capacity for language, but it's the part of the brain where we all feel something. It's where we understand an emotional outcome having to do with the experience that we have. And then the third part is this idea that everybody experiences far more than what they understand, and it's experience rather than understanding that drives behavior. So if you're looking to use your design to generate a behavior, whether that's positive word of mouth, whether that's transactions and selling products, whatever it may be, the things that influence the behavior the most is the idea of what is the experience that people have with your design. And so those three things are really the basis for how we would approach and think about designing any kind of challenge. When I started the company, I would have been happy to have one or two of these clients. It's been an incredible career, because what I'm most proud of is not the fact that we've worked with some amazing people, which of course we have, but the thing that's probably most satisfying is in many cases, we work with them for many years. And that goes back to, I think, having a point of view about the end user. And it also points to the fact that we keep a certain degree of humility in what we do. We tend to inflate our own egos themselves as designers. There's a lot of architects and designers out there who sort of live for that part of the business. But I think keeping a certain humility in this is what allows us to have long-term relationships. And so fundamentally, to me, long-term relationship with these companies, with these brands, is fundamentally the most valuable piece. We have a global footprint, but we also have a global mindset. We probably have one of the most diverse companies in the world, whether it be male or female, or from different cultures, different ethnic backgrounds, different languages. We are really fortunate in that we believe we get stronger through diversity. And that's one of the things that we look at in our approach to the offices. We've worked in many sectors. Sectors to us are not particularly important because the underlying component to working with any of these sectors is working with people. And so designing for human outcomes sort of trumps or supersedes these categories. So a lot of people say, well, what is experience? It's a very soft kind of term. Does it have real meaning? And we believe that it's actually an expression of a core set of values. And the brands, just like people, if you're creating a great relationship, the values that you stand for is what enables that relationship. And so what you're designing, the touch points that you're creating for those companies, are ultimately communicating those values in a way that helps people feel whether they can trust you, whether they can believe in you, and want to participate in your business. Another piece we look at if we're trying to create value is this idea of differentiation. So as the research shows, a lot of companies, a lot of CEOs spend a lot of time creating a differentiated product, but ultimately they turn around and deliver it the same way as their peers. And when they do that, they tend to commoditize what they have rather than make it more valuable. And consumers just don't see it. They see a category, maybe it's mobile phones today, it's all just a value decision because people are communicating and delivering the brand in a way that does not differentiate them from their peers, but starts to align with their peers. And ultimately that makes your product actually worth less. And so if you're creating commodity, you're going to struggle to be differentiated within a category. And we think this is a huge tool to build on and to leverage. The other tool that we think we have at our disposal is where can we find points, opportunities for emotional connections. And what's interesting is, we know word of mouth is valuable. It drives the majority of people engaging with your company. But what's interesting is 80% of word of mouth comes from direct experience. So if you're not actually focusing on that experience, you're leaving money on the table if you're a company trying to build a strong relationship with your customers. So one of the points that was brought up in the question and answer with Genry was this idea of how do we convince our clients that we're going to deliver the business outcomes. And I think one of the key things here is we always talk about the human outcomes of the customer and that relationship that you're building with them through the touch points. And that's places, that's services, and that's communications. Today, it's very hard for it to be a siloed type of engagement, but it's something that has to work across many different forms of engagement. And so it's important for us, if we're going to achieve the business outcomes, that we focus on the human outcomes. And we use something called a value creation engine. If human outcomes is the framework to start with, then you can develop a strategy that delivers on those outcomes. And only then can you develop the tactics that support that strategy. 9 times out of 10, a client will come to us and say, I have this great tactic, I have this great idea for a solution, but it's a tactical point of view to begin with. And ultimately, it's a high risk proposition if you start with tactics. But as you mentioned earlier, if you start with why, if you start with the human outcomes, you build a strategy on that, then the tactics, you have a much, much higher chance of being successful and being financially beneficial to your client. So that's a short summary of the basic framework. And I put together some case studies here just to try to help illustrate that, because as architects and designers on this call, you want to look at images of projects, you want to see different design solutions that have been done. So I think it's helpful to talk about it within the case studies. So, for us, return on experience can mean many things. In some cases, and in most cases, companies are looking to increase their sales. And if they have a solution that increases their sales, they're generally going to be happy. But some companies are looking at growth, and some companies are looking at foot traffic, and some companies are looking at advocacy. So these are other aspects of experience that ultimately creates value for your customers. And when you combine these things, it creates kind of an exponential value. And so regardless of the companies that we've worked for, with these different metrics, they turn out not just to be a soft metric, but something that's fundamentally driving the success of their business. So some simple examples. We'll start with Apple, because everybody knows Apple. When we started with them, they weren't a big company. They were a $2.5 billion company, and they had about 90 days of cash flow before they were going to be in trouble. And today, it's probably impossible to imagine Apple without the retail program. That it's become such a ubiquitous touch point for the company in terms of conveying the culture, conveying the qualities that the brand has, and ultimately has grown to the largest company in the world. When we look at Apple, some of these things should be obvious in retrospect, and the idea that when we look back at it, it made perfect sense. But at the beginning, it wasn't clear whether or not it was going to be successful. In fact, the first night that we launched the first store, Steve was sitting on one of the tables, and we had just finished laying out everything. Everything looked perfect. The lighting was perfect. Everything was ready, and we were all very happy and proud. And he looked at us and he said, "Guys, what if nobody comes tomorrow?" And this idea that he wasn't sure. And at that point, it made all of us nervous because he wasn't sure. But he recognized that without taking a risk, he didn't have really the opportunity for a great success. And so he was taking some risk here. He was doing something that was not fitting into necessarily conventional wisdom from the standpoint of what his competitors would naturally do based on best practices. So one of the things that I would say was important in working with Steve for 12 years was this idea of not following convention and working off of best practices. We have also been involved in events and activations for them. So this has been something that we've been doing for more than I guess 24 years, if you count this year. So whether that's the launch of the new Power Max a few weeks ago, or whether it's the launch of the colored iMacs at the beginning, we have been involved in creating these press events and keynotes and experiences for everybody who's visiting the Apple events and learning about the products. The other part is looking at behavior, and human interaction is one of the tools that if you're just looking at the physical space, you may overlook the interpersonal space. And it's important to recognize that the service design and the design of the behavior will have just as much impact on communicating the values of a company as the physical elements in the space. So it's important to look at these in a holistic way. And this is something that we have applied, in many different applications, different types of companies, but is really a key component, which is to look at designing the human-to-human interaction. So as a case study, everything from small format stores, launches of events, large format stores, interior fixturing, the retail experience. We've even been involved in workplace design. We're actually starting a new project working on Foster's new campus in Cupertino right now to help impact some of the employee experience there. But these have all been things that fundamentally drive the expression of the Apple culture. Another case study. This is mobility sector, Nissan Experience Center in downtown Tokyo. It's at the Ginza Crossing, and they originally asked us to increase foot traffic, and they wanted us to go from 30,000 visitors to 40,000 visitors a month. And we said, okay, we'll take the challenge, but we want to not present any of the cars that you sell today. We only want to present cars that you're thinking about in the future, and we won't take it on unless we can change this paradigm from just trying to sell the car to trying to sell the idea of what you believe in. And in doing so, we ended up with 250,000 visitors a month. It was incredibly successful launch and program. But this was a very, very subtle change from the type of conversation that you're having between the customer and the brand, and the space and the tools, the digital elements, the vehicles, all of these things were all built on what is Nissan's belief in the future of mobility. And so, because of that, it's been incredibly successful. It's a two-story space here on the corner of the I want to say Suntory building, and it has the different presentations within the space that are all about future mobility solutions. So this gives you some idea of the visual language associated with this. But again, foot traffic was the primary metric, and this was the reason that I think this really changed the way people thought about experience centers as it pertains to vehicles. Globe, a project for the Philippines that we worked on for many years. I don't have the rest of this deck to share other than this slide, but we were involved in the Gen 3 stores and now the Globe iconic store in Fort Bonifacio. But one of the interesting things about this, and the reason I included in this, is when Globe came to us more than five years ago, I guess now 6 or 7 years ago, they had 23% market share, and they asked us how could they change their stores to improve their market share. And we went and we looked at all of the competitors in the market, and the opportunity was to do what everyone else was not doing. And because everyone else was performing the interactions with their customers in virtually the same way. And what we said was all of the companies are focused on selling the pipes. They're selling the speed and the feed and the package. We think you should focus on selling the emotion, which is the outcome of what comes through the pipes. And that you should think of yourself not as a telco, but think of yourself as an entertainment company. What you're bringing to people is actually entertainment. You're not bringing them a connection. The connection they're going to buy no matter what, because they love the content. And so by shifting that, it's helped them grow to the 56% market share that they enjoy today. In the hospitality sector, we've been working with Virgin for many, many years. We were hired the same year by Steve Jobs and Richard Branson, so that was a big year for us. But this was to start working on their lounge program, and how can we separate an airline company that has very few airplanes, very few routes, not a lot of money, and how do they compete with the big boys? And so this was a big challenge for us, but something that I think has led to a number of different projects from this relationship. So we started with the lounges. We ultimately then worked on the hotel program. Actually, the second program was working on A380s. So they asked us to design what an A380 experience might look like. And then they asked us to think about what Virgin hotels might look like. So for us, they've been a great client because every few years they come to us with a white paper and they say, you know what, we have this crazy business idea. What would that look like? What could that be? And so we get this brief, and we get to then dream a bit about what that could be. In the financial sector, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but we've been working on bank transformation projects. One of the reasons I put this in is we started with Citibank years ago, but we're currently working with both BDO and BPI today in the Philippines to help look at their new retail bank experience. And then this project I thought I would put in is a pretty fun one. This is called Drop Zone Dubai. It's something we're doing for the Crown Prince in Dubai, but it was a large piece of land. They wanted to do a development, and we saw it as, rather than a development that has hotel, has retail, has condominiums, rather than a typical mixed-use development, how could we use this to help reposition Dubai as a place for people to come and experience extreme sports? And so one of the elements of this was a 500-meter base jumping tower that you see on the right-hand side, but using this place as a way to start to help position Dubai in this active center. And so this idea of it being a home for extreme sports and high octane type of experiences. The 500-meter base jumping tower was a bit of a crazy idea, but the notion is that this is a place in the world where you can pretty much do base jumping year round with a few days when there's sandstorm, maybe no, but it was a place where you could actually create a destination specifically for these extreme sports. The Crown Prince also has a skydiving center on this site and a few other things, so it fit naturally in with that. And we recently just finished something called Deep Dive Dubai, which I think there's a Will Smith video out there on him doing this dive, but it's the deepest swimming pool in the world now for people who want to have a deep dive experience. But our planning here was to create architectural forms that provided a lot of shade, made it possible for people to work and engage outside of the enclosed space, but also the forms of these roofs were meant to mitigate some of the airflow disruption for people who are base jumping off of this tower. The tower itself, we worked with Burrell Happold and another local architect to help create this diagram. But what we have is this 500-meter tower has a cloud hall and a restaurant in the top, viewing stations. We have rock climbing walls at 400 meters, so you're inside the building, but you're 400 meters in the air. There's hospitality, lobby, zip lines, retail cafe, but basically a vertical experience. In addition to that, we've set these different extreme sport things, everything from cycling to parkour and other things within these gardens on the roofs, and developed the branding and much of the experiences for this. Even to the point of looking at apps where if somebody is jumping off of a building, you get a view on your mobile device of what's on their head cam. But the idea here was really to help Dubai look at this area in a new and extreme way. And I think this is one of the last sections I'll talk about, which is McLaren. McLaren has just named us Experience Design Agency of Record, which is kind of an interesting new way of thinking about how they engage design. It used to be they would name advertising agencies of record. Today, they're saying that no, advertising falls under what we're doing. And so this is some of the branding work that we've done with McLaren, the new identity and the new speed marks, photography standards, visual standards for the brand and how it's presented. A number of different ways of thinking about how to express the company and the idea of motion and working much more in a digital world today where they find themselves. These are just some of the examples of how that word mark then translates into some of the communications materials. Ultimately, what we're looking to do here, and this is something called the new algorithm of value by Scott Galloway, but what it does is it recognizes that the most successful companies in the world today, those in the upper right-hand corner, are successful because of the number of receptors that they have in the marketplace and the intelligence that they can derive from those receptors. And so in this case, when you do a Google search, Google gets smarter. They know more about you. They can provide you better products. They can deliver better engagement. And so one of the lessons from this new algorithm of value is that the companies who have a dialogue with their customers versus a monologue have a much better chance at being relevant and creating more relevant products for their customers. And so when we think of anything that we're designing, we think of them as receptors or touch points rather than the traditional verticals that are commonly referred to. We also create something that goes along with a physical master plan, and this is a proprietary thing that we've been doing for a number of years now. But we create an experience master plan. So long before we ever define the physical aspects of a site, we want to know what's the potential for the experience. If we define the potential for the experience, that goes back to human outcomes, laddering to strategy and laddering to tactics. Once we know those outcomes from the experience master plan, we can ultimately then design the right architecture, design the right parks, design the right communications, design those elements on the physical side that deliver on the experience side. So you can think of it as a relatively sophisticated programming document, but ultimately what we're doing is we are programming the experience first and then designing the elements to deliver the experience. And so that's something that we feel is very important as a structure. When we look at that experience master plan, we take these kind of 8 points in the middle, and we make sure that we ask not only ourselves, is this relevant to the consumer or to the customer, but is it also relevant to the company? So for being human-centered, it's not just the customer, it's the customer and the company. How are they both interacting? If it's aligning with the values, it's not just the values of the company, but do the values of the customer and the company work together? And so we use these 8 points as key levers to understand what is the most successful interactions that we can create, because the stronger the connections, the greater the results. And if we look at results, really the column on the right-hand side here is probably the most important one. But if you can create a successful emotional experience for people, you're going to have typically 6 times the lift. Let's call it sales or engagement, whatever your metric is that you want to consider as lift. But people are going to engage with your brand 6 times more with a positive experience. Makes sense, right? It's very natural. You're also going to create people to become advocates of your company. 12 times more likely for people to recommend the company, to tell other people that your company is a great place to be, a great company to connect with. And the most interesting part is 5 times more likely to forgive a mistake when you make one. And you always make one. So it's okay, you know, that when you make a mistake, if people see that you're dedicated to their success, their experience, they forgive a lot of mistakes as a part of this as well. So to summarize, I would just say that if you're looking at creating value, and ultimately I think all good architecture and design is about creating value, means you're creating meaningful experiences for people. And if you do that, it means that you have to focus on what is a better experience. How do we solve the kind of things that, you know, that we see today with the environment, or we see with our use of resources, or we see as challenges? How do we solve for those problems? And I think it's incumbent on us to all sort of take that on our shoulders and try to help get there. And the last piece is a shameless plug for the book. I finished this book in February of this year, and you can get it on Amazon if you like. But if you want to learn more about these kinds of things and the topics I'm talking about, hopefully this is a helpful thing for you to look at. So that's all I have today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as well.
Wow, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. So that was a very in-depth as it is. So I'm actually looking forward to getting that book as well.
Thank you.
So one of the first questions that pop into my mind right now, in architectural school, one of the first things that we've been taught was the concept of form follows function. So in this new paradigm of experiential design, how do you think this is still relevant today?
Well, we have a formula that says E is greater than F over F, which is experience is greater than form following function.
Okay. Great. That's great.
That's the formula that we look at. But I'll tell you a short story on this, because actually it's something I learned in my high school drafting class, and it was a lesson that's stuck with me for my entire life. But our drafting teacher told us to pick a piece of architecture in the world that we admired, a great piece of architecture, and to draw elevations of it, to draw a section of it, to do, you know, orthographic views of this. And again, this was before computers, for those of you out there. We used to have to do this by hand. You know, we did these drawings, and we all were very proud. We put our drawings on the wall, and he asked us, so how many of you think you understand what great architecture is? How many of you think you really understand architecture now? And we all proudly raised our hands. And he said that, you know, you're all wrong. That the only way you understand great architecture is to go and experience the architecture.
Yeah.
To be in the building in the morning when the sunlight is coming in, to be in the building when the sun is going down. But he said, unless you experience great architecture, it's impossible for you to understand it. You can see lots of pictures, you can see lots of drawings of it, and you know, you can do your best to try to interpret that. But he said the best way to understand anything is through experience. And so that's always kind of stuck since high school. And the more that we realized what we were doing, the more we realized what we're actually doing is designing for the human outcome, designing for that experience that people have. So, yeah, that's the answer to the foreign policy question.
All right, thanks, Wad.
That's great.
Okay, so yeah, Archie.
Yeah. Tim, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm actually overwhelmed by the amount of success that you have. But I have a question. Besides the overwhelming successes, like you said, Apple has been the most, in terms of gross sales per square foot in history, it's the most in history, right? But I want to talk about, like you said, on the last part of your presentation about mistakes. Times are 5%, 5 times more likely to forgive your mistakes. Do you have a memorable mistake? And how did you handle that?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I think it's an interesting one because, part of what you need to put into your process of working, I think, is a certain degree of comfort with making mistakes. And one of the things we found is that sometimes mistakes are your best friend. Sometimes they're your enemy. But usually when you make a mistake, you can learn from that. And what you learn from it will lead you to that next thing. And I would say that in our process, we go through a lot of prototyping. I was on a call a few nights ago with actually Genry and I were both on a call with Renzo Piano, and they said, we always start making models right at the beginning, and they're going to make mistakes at the beginning with that process, but it's okay. They're comfortable with starting with an initial thought and then being able to push that to a point of determining whether it's a great idea or not. And the other thing that I think, this goes back to great leadership, but Steve, when he asked us whether or not people would come tomorrow on the retail store, it was he was telling us that it was okay for us if it didn't work. He was setting, because he thought it could fail. It could, maybe people wouldn't come, and he didn't want the team to be demoralized. But he wanted us to have a mindset that it was okay if there was a failure, because we were going to learn from it. And what was interesting, the second year of the retail program, we had just finished 20, 25 stores, whatever it was that year, and we went into our Tuesday meeting with him that we had every week, and he sat down and he said, "Okay, we're starting over." And we sort of, what do you mean we're starting over? What happened, right? And he said, he said, all of my competition is copying our stores right now. He said, so I want to start changing the stores for the next generation of stores. And rather than wait 5 years, he was starting the second year. And it was brilliant leadership, because he was anticipating his competition and always looking at how to get ahead and stay ahead of his competitor. And at that time, we all thought, wow, that's crazy, but okay, we get to start again and rethink it. But he was doing it purely from a strategic standpoint. And I think fundamentally it was brilliant leadership.
Courageous, brilliant leadership.
That's right.
So at this point, can we start taking in questions, Archie?
Wait, before we take in questions, I want to poke a little bit on that Tuesday meetings with Steve Jobs. I'm sure this is probably one of the most asked questions of you, Tim. How was it working with Steve Jobs?
Yeah, I had that question also.
A lot of people ask this, and
exactly.
And, at the time, we didn't know it was going to be as special as it turned out to be. Obviously, with him, we were only able to work together for 12 years, and he was sick, near the end of that engagement. But a lot of people have heard about him as being difficult, being a tyrant, or some of these things. And I found him absolutely brilliant, but in a very unique way. And that way was he was incredibly skilled at what I would consider left brain processes. So if you came in with a logical argument, he could go through the logic tree and determine if there was a bust or not. But then he would look at it, and if he didn't find a break in the logic, he'd look at it from an intuitive side. And he would say, well, this part just doesn't feel right. And what made him difficult for some people to work with was they were either really strong right brain, or really strong left brain, and therefore they couldn't handle when he would switch on them. And his ability to switch like that made his insight so much stronger. And it made it difficult because a lot of people just, they weren't wired that way. So it was difficult for them to think like that. But ultimately, I think that was his greatest strength, was he had this ambidextrous kind of mindset. And, that to me was great. Other things, I mean, we got to know him personally. We saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, obviously. But, he was really funny. I thought he was much funnier than a lot of people thought. I wanted him to do a Saturday Night Live bit, but he never would.
That would have been great.
Yeah, I wanted him to parody himself, but
hilarious.
Anyway, yeah, but I just think he was a very unique man. I mean, in terms of people that we've worked with in my lifetimes, clearly one of the most unique individuals that we've ever had the chance to work with. So anyway, there's lots of stories for a beer or something someday in the future.
Let's do that. But that idea of him posting Saturday Night Live and have a parody of himself, that's gonna be hilarious. Like all the stereotypes of Steve Jobs that people think about and be like that. Oh my God, that's gonna be hilarious. Okay. We don't have any questions so far with our audience.
We don't have.
I guess they're
Okay,
still
so I have one.
thinking about- No.
So,
Benj, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Tim. So, when we talk about experiential design, how do you separate your bias of your own preference when it comes to experience? Because I have some clients who tell me that you are not the market. When, let's say, I'm designing for something, and then they tell me that I can't use my personal bias since I am not the target market. So how do you separate that bias?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's always difficult to put yourself in the mindset of your target, whatever that target is. And for us, we found that it's difficult to do if it's one person. So the idea of the star architect, in my mind, is kind of a failed idea, because if it was a great idea, we'd live in a much better world, right? But unless you're building a diverse team, it's going to be hard to have those kinds of insights that you need to really be in touch with who that customer is. And I think it takes a diversity. We have strategists and communication designers and architects. We put them together, but we need people from different cultures. We need people from who have a different perspective on it. And we have to do research. We have to understand who those people are and try to have as much empathy as possible for the kinds of conditions that they're encountering. But it's a great question, because it's one of the hardest things to do, is to let go of your own bias. And that's where I think that idea of humility is really important. Unless you have that humility, it's hard to let go. And you just want to make this shape, just want to make this particular solution. It may not be right for that end user. And so I think it's important to have a certain degree of humility around what it is you're creating, and make sure that it resonates, with people.
Wow.
No questions yet, Archie?
No, I'm just enjoying the answers. No questions yet.
I mean, from the audience.
No.
No
If you have
questions.
other questions, IPP, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
and people can feel free to ask any kind of question. It's, don't be shy. My wife is from the Philippines. She would have lots of comments, I'm sure.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
what's your favorite Filipino dish? Adobo?
Yeah, that's what everyone always asks me. Yeah. I
Okay,
don't know.
so-
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What would be when I read through it, I saw that you are also working with Xiaomi.
Yeah.
So what's the main difference, like working with Apple and Xiaomi? Because more or less, like based on what I know about Xiaomi, practically the same.
They're copying
They
each
sell
other.
gadgets or communication devices. Well, I guess Xiaomi would have other products, but what would be the main difference?
Well, for us, I would say initially when we first started working with Xiaomi, they were much closer to Apple as a company. They wanted to emulate Apple because
Right.
they could very quickly in China they could get market share by being similar to Apple. And it was frustrating for Apple, of course, but with Xiaomi, as we worked with them more and more, we learned that they were actually fundamental differences about the way they thought about making products accessible to people. And if you look at Apple, Apple tends to position their products at the traditional top of the pyramid from a price and accessibility standpoint. So the pyramid is oriented in the way that pyramids are normally oriented.
Yeah.
In Xiaomi, it's upside down. So they want the most people to be able to get the most products at the lowest price. So it's a very interesting twist, and in a way, it's very Chinese on one hand in terms of looking at the sort of the social breadth of the idea, but economically, it's very, very different to what is a traditional Western model. And so, if you do a heat map of people using iPhones, you do a heat map of people using Samsung or other phones, it tends to skew around economic stratas within countries. But when you look at Xiaomi, that model, turns upside down. And so more and more people will have it, and the economic strata is much deeper. So what they're trying to do is to make products at a lower cost for a broader segment. And they make where Apple maybe makes, I'm not sure what they're up to today, maybe 25 or 30 products. Xiaomi makes 2,000 products.
Yeah.
And televisions and segways and air filters and you name it. They want to make anything electronic as part of a lifestyle kind of strategy.
I think there was one question in the chat about Globe. Okay, so the question is, Tim, when you worked with Globe in the Philippines, what did you discover in terms of the experience their target market is looking for?
So when we started with them, I mentioned that they were fundamentally looking at how to grow market share. And so from that perspective, they had to expand their services, build more cell towers. I think they're still trying to build more cell towers. But the idea was that they were looking to expand market share. And so our focus there was to do what we could to get more people to want to be part of the Globe family as we could. And so the idea of shifting from selling you a 1,000 gigabyte package or what have you. Instead of talking about that as everybody else in the market did, what we wanted to do was to focus on the kinds of things that you could get from that feed. So the emotional part. So in the Philippines, everyone loves basketball. Everyone loves Disney Channel. There were a lot of things that were attractive to broad market segments in the country. And when we found those broad market segments, then the product that Globe would offer had to do with those things that were appealing to the largest segments.
The
So,
content.
yeah,
Is
the
it
content. And
Yeah.
and that's kind of where we started, but then we realized we were actually missing Filipino content, and that there was an opportunity for Globe to start a business that generated Filipino content. So whether we started with music, and then we did theater, and they did they did a whole series where people were shooting a TV series on iPhones, you know, as a
Their own
as a
content.
complement. You know, so the idea that pretty soon you moved into this model where Globe became a collaborator with the creative community in the Philippines, which of course is very robust, I would say, very, you know, more so than a lot of countries. They were able to activate that kind of core segment. And I think that notion, whether it's singing or acting or performing or those types of things, those were all core things that resonated with the broadest segment of the audience. So we were really going for breadth initially in that strategy.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, so we have one question here from Ryan Sihupo. He's one of our members. You mentioned that you are working with BPI and BDO now. What unique Filipino traits are you considering in your design formulation?
So
And there's a follow-up. What is the effect on the banking experience?
yeah, I think when you look at either of those two companies, they're fundamentally different, even though they're banks. Their value system and the way that they feel they fit within the culture is somewhat different. So BPI, I would say, is a very broad extension of their services, but I don't know if they have the same attention to detail or experience as maybe BDO would, and so I think that it's interesting when you look at how does it impact the experience. The spaces that we're creating for BPI have been, I would say, more labored, where the ones in BDO became more natural. And so I think there's just part of that's a function of the business culture. But when you start to work with a company, the values that company has naturally translates into the experience, because they're going to accept and respond to the types of things that they feel reflect their nature. But there are a number of different ideas in terms of how does it relate to the Philippine community, the idea of large and small gathering spaces, idea of marketplaces. I can't go into a lot of details, but those components are actually very specific to what is traditional Filipino cultural qualities.
We have other questions from your end.
I think we have another question on the chat. Okay, let me just read through it. Humility, empathy. These are great values we should be reminded of. Aside from client inputs, where do you get your inspiration for your designs and concepts? Is it still human-centered, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of the inspirations, I tend to look at a lot of things that's going on in the art world. I think artists have traditionally been a source of inspiration for work we've done. That's something personally that I'm interested in, but also it's at the edge where I think things are being challenged. Challenging assumptions, questioning authority, all of those kinds of things start in the art world. And I'm always interested on the boundaries that are being understood or expressed. And so when I see an example of a company, take Vice as a media company. Vice was a much different company than than the usual broadcasting companies, and they were very disruptive for a while when they first started. I'm always interested in those things that are creating a ripple in the fabric of what we find as the norm. So I think those are areas for inspiration.
Okay, there's a question that came in. Can we post the question? All right, the question is localization of retail experience still important with the global brands? Or is retail experience similar regardless of the country?
I would say it depends. It depends on the brand. Certainly, global brands tend to be more formulaic, but not every brand is. One of my favorite brands is Aesop, which is a cleanser and body care company from Australia. And what I like about them is they have a different architect do every store. So there's not a formula other than they want the next new creative, interesting idea. And I think it's actually, it's changing the paradigm of kind of rubber stamp stores, which people get pretty tired of. And I think that as we move further and further forward with brands being seen or being ubiquitous in all different parts of the world, if they're all the same, it kind of loses value. And so I think Aesop is onto something around this opportunity to leverage unique aspects of what they stand for. But is the experience similar regardless of the country? Yes, for some brands it is. But I think for the more interesting ones, they tend to localize it in some way.
Okay. I think last few questions. Hi Tim. How do you think retail space design would look like in the next few decades?
5 years from now, 5 years.
It might look different by next year.
Yeah. I hope I'm still here in a few decades. Let's see. I think the the interesting thing about retail is it's historically evolved traditionally every 5 years. That's the kind of industry standard refresh. However, with the advent of more and more digital technology, and with the challenges that we've seen with retail centers and the number of people engaging in retail centers today versus what they were 5 years ago, we're doing some work in Japan right now that's very interesting because they want us to create retail in the future, and it's not retail for today, but it's retail for the future. And in doing that, the idea of qualities that need to be created in order to be competitive and also sort of a business model is a big challenge. And I think that what's going to happen is you're going to see more and more hybrid type spaces, more and more technological engagement in physical spaces that we see today. So I think people are exploring that and trying a lot of different things. We've got a great model, we think, that's going to work. We'll see if it does, but if not, it'll be one of my mistake answers. When you ask me.
As you have a new answer to that.
Yeah.
All right. Great answer,
Last
Tim.
question, Archie. Do you want to read it?
Okay. Where's the last question? I think there are no more questions. Although I have a question.
Oh, okay. Sure.
More of a observation, if you make them. With your design process, things. I guess. At least I think things might get a little bit too formulaic when you approach a design problem with this kind of formula. And how are you changing your approach per, like, let's say, per brand in architectural execution wise? Like they say, I've seen some of your works like in Shimano. I can see a little bit of similarities with what you did with Globe, with what you did with Apple. How do you keep yourself from being like repetitive in terms of architectural design?
Mhm. Well, I think that when you start to approach problems in similar ways, there's probably going to be some similar solutions that come out with, and so to make everything is kind of building on what you learned previously. So hopefully it's a progression forward. Sometimes it's a regression also. But I think hopefully it's you're learning from what you tried before, and the feedback that came from that, you're able to now apply an evolution of that thought. So I always think of architecture and design ultimately it's a conversation. It's a conversation that those of us who work in creative fields use to communicate with who experience what we're creating. And we're always in a conversation. We're putting out something and we're getting back something. And I think as long as we keep that kind of an open dialogue, we're probably to get better faster. And if we don't, then I think it's a much slower progression.
So your best project is always your next project in a way.
Yeah. In a way, I'm always looking forward to the next thing. Someone asked us in the Middle East. They asked us if we would ever consider designing a country.
Oh wow!
A government, and I thought that was the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I've been fascinated about that ever since. If you took everything we've ever learned about governance throughout history, all of these things, what would you do if you started over? Like how would you create the best possible way of people being able to govern themselves and be successul? I just thought it was a fantastic abstract design problem. But anyway, yeah, maybe one day we get to play in that space. That would be very interesting.
Only the Middle East clients can think of something like that.
Yeah, they have the ambition there in some ways.
Right. Next question. I have another question in the chat. Let me just read it. How do you deal with difficult clients? Like really difficult client where you've already formulated a good design, but they're just difficult. Pardon.
Yeah. I think you could argue that Steve Jobs was a difficult client at times, and that it was okay. We were consultants. We could be fired any day, and one of the things that kept us around for a long time was everybody who worked for him were always second guessing what he wanted to hear, and we were in a position where our only real value would be to tell him what we honestly believe, and that from that we would continue to be valuable to him. And I think that what you're really trying to do is to build trust. And it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're working with somebody and they're difficult, they may not believe you to begin with, and that's okay. You may have to really explain why you think this. If it's just because you feel it, you may not survive. But if you understand why you're doing it, why the things you're recommending are important, and sometimes a difficult client just wants to push you to see if you're going to fall down or not. We've been challenged by many clients that they will just start out and push you very hard to see if you believe in what you're saying, and it may hurt, but if you believe in it, to express the passion you have behind it, I think you have a much better chance of being a success. So that, I think, be honest, be yourself, and be tenacious.
There you go. Great answer.
Wow.
Anywhere difficult than Steve Jobs, huh?
So there's a comment in the chat. Hey
Yeah.
Tim, great talk. If you're gonna design a country, I'd be willing to intern for your firm.
Send him an email.
Okay, so I think if there are no more questions, I just want to share that coming into this afternoon, I was thinking I'd be learning a new tool, a new design philosophy, but actually, like now towards the end, that I should ask the why of the project. I'm starting to ask the why of my practice, of my business. So I think I have to start asking myself why. But
There you go.
maybe to close, do you have any final words for the Filipino designers, like particularly the architects here in the group?
I would say, really, whether it's a designer from Philippines or maybe other designers who are young and starting, you have to start with a belief, but the belief should be grounded. Make sure that you think about why you believe something. So like you just said, go back and start with why. I may believe something as a young designer, but I may not know why I believe it. A lot of times I just, but work hard at understanding why, because your intuition is telling you something incredibly valuable. You just have to figure out what that is. And I think, it's like, how do you unlock that? The more you're able to go from that intuitive side to the logic side, I think the better chance you have at having a successful career. So I would say that, and particularly if for the Philippines, I think that there's such great opportunity for creative endeavors coming from the Philippine culture. As I said, I'm a big fan, obviously, because of my wife, but I think that it's always been a culture that's quite unique in the world, and there's even with challenges, there's a lot of positivity. So I think staying positive and working hard, those things pay off. But be honest and true to what you love. That's also an important part.
There you go.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Before we proceed to the next part of the program, can we ask Genry to join us?
I'm still here. I mean, I've been listening.
Alice. There you go. To join us in the panel. So
okay, I'll take a picture. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
very nice. All right. There's gonna be a wallpaper of mine for a few weeks because this is an unbelievable experience. I'm just starstruck. But anyways, Again, Tim and Genry, thank you very much for joining us on this Saturday after. Well, it's not Saturday afternoon in Tim's time in Tim's area, wherever Tim. Are you in San Francisco, Tim?
I'm in Hawaii right now.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I see. Having a great
Yes.
time, I'm sure. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us and your valuable insights. And we with this we would like to present you with an certificate of appreciation. Let me just read through it. The United Architects of the Philippines, Quezon City South Triangle Chapter issues this e-certificate of recognition to Tim Kobe for sharing his valuable time, insights, and knowledge as a guest speaker with the title Return on Experience via live stream on Zoom meetings given this 30th of October 2021, signed by our chapter secretary Beverly Locsin and our chapter president Mons Tarare. Thank you very much, Tim and Genry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
There you go. If anybody would like to reach out to you or what are your or send a resume when you finally design that country, please send your emails
Let us know.
to
Genry.
let Genry know. Again, Tim,
Yeah.
Genry, we hope you enjoy your rest of the weekend. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right.
Whew, what an afternoon.
I know.
Mind blown.
Mind
Haven't
blown.
been this mind blown in a long time. I mean, yung mga pinaniniwalaan mo biglang parang hindi man mali. It's not that it's wrong, but there's something deeper that you have to look for pala.
Oh, the theme is realignment. Parang with their design process, they're helping brands realign the execution of their image, of their brand with the brand values. So to speak, short of saying doing what you're saying, no, let your walk the talk basically.
Correct.
Wow,
So-
what an afternoon! Is everybody still there? Yeah. Before we proceed to the next part of the program, let me remind everyone that there is a Thanksgiving or sort of a hangout or culminating night later on at 6 p.m. And there we will be giving away raffle prizes. And to
Oh.
anyone who would like to join and hang out and talk about what we have been through the whole of October, good or bad, whatever you learn, just hang out with us or tell us what you think, or if you have suggestions on how to better do these events. So let us know. Join us later on, 6 p.m. And we'll be raffling away, of course, the grand raffle prize of a Huion battery-free pen tablet. Yan. And we're also giving away two Logitech C270 720p webcams. 3 winners for the Baseus LED monitor light bar. Yan. Usong-uso ngayon yan. Lalo pagka nag-work from home, maganda yung lighting. And also some event items in Arktoberfest First Fest t-shirts and Arktoberfest hot and cold tumblers. Yeah. So join us later on. Pwede padala daw sa Cebu. Kung maano ka sa raffle, why not? Diba? Pwede natin i-arrange yung Lala Move. Umabot dyan. Hindi, pero let's see. No? I think yung Singapore nga nakakaabot eh. Alright, so join us later on, 6 p.m. IPP, yes. What an afternoon. Kamusta ka dyan?
Well, muna ako before 6 p.m. Parang
Before
kailangan
6
ko
p.m.
magsulat eh.
Kailangan mo mag-realign na nung business plan mo.
Hindi kita.
Ayan, hindi kita. So this afternoon's Arktoberfest seminars are brought to you by our sponsors.
Yes.
Of course, number 1, Boysen, the number 1 paint. Our partners in BITC Roofing Materials, Foamy Philippines, Starken, and ITC Corp. Si YouTube din daw. Sa YouTube daw. Pwede i-rewatch. Pwede i-rewatch, yes. Sa YouTube.
Facebook. Pwede rin sa Facebook.
Yes, Facebook din. Follow niyo yung Arktoberfest na Facebook page. Nandun lahat nung seminars and videos, even from last year. So, yan. And also, we would like to remind yung assessment natin, yung feedback form. We'll post the link to our chat. Alright. Wala ba tayong ano ngayon, raffle? Mamaya ng gabi na lang.
May roleta.
Mamaya ng gabi na lang, wala bang raffle? Wala. Mamaya na lang. So yun. Okay guys, so it's been hell of a weekend for us here at Arktoberfest. I hope you enjoyed your seminars, your talks. Kasi kami na-enjoy namin. Mismo mga host no bench.
Oh, grabe to. And pero thank you to our support team, to the tech, sa
Yes.
mga director, the registration, galing.
Yes. Yeah, I'm board of directors natin. Everybody who has been a part of this program for the last 4 weeks.
4 weeks, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Papasok ba? Ay, before we end, can we call in our chapter president? If okay lang. Nandiyan ba siya?
Dito.
Yan. Ay,
I'm
Chris,
here. Yes.
Tama ka naman dito.
Nandito naman ako. Hindi naman ako nawala.
Ayan. Chris,
Yes.
ano na? Kumusta na?
Ayun, na mind blown sila eh. Pero I would like to give the closing remarks for this event.
Okay.
Pero
Go ahead.
later on for fellowship, sana all will be there pa rin. All right. Before we close the event, I'd like to thank this opportunity to say on behalf of the UAP Quezon City South Triangle Chapter and of course the Arktoberfest Orgcom, congratulations to all the participants and guests from South Triangle members, other chapters, our District A3 Director Maricel Arce Ignacio. Ma'am, thank you po. And District A3 Presidents, QC Silangan and QC Saga, other districts and chapters, namely District A1A, Manila Sampaloc. Hindi ko ina-expect na maraming pupunta. Manila Sampaloc, Cavite Aguinaldo Central, Makati CBD, San Fernando, Benguet Cordillera, Quezon Province, Green Hills, Sugbu Chapter, Capital Chapter, Makati Chapter, for attending and supporting our event. Every year we become better, and the event would not be complete without the support from our industry partners, Boysen, Starken, FOMI, BITC, ITC, and Crown Pipes. Our board officers, our volunteers, committee members, Matthew Villanueva, Karen Ferrios, for the food, thank you, Angela Guiao, Abe Nimes, Mark Sagimo, Mitch Bersamin, and Glenn Ambas. Our past presidents, of course, IPP Ben San Victores and Architect Jordan Tatlonghari and Architect Baste San Sebastian. Our chairman and vice chair of Arktoberfest, of course, hindi mabubuo ang event kung wala tong dalawang to. Architect Adrian Tamponino and Architect Archie Tolentino. These people, awesome and fabulous people, are the backbone of this event. For gathering the awesome speakers for this year's event also, from Architect Abelardo Tolentino, Architect Choi Funk, Architect Adarsh Rai, Aldo Solazzo, Chris Libunao, our very own AK Doratan, and to Genry and Tim Kobe, thank you very much. As the third year of Arktoberfest event ends, we in the Quezon City chapter are hoping next year, sana we could really be having our face-to-face event where we can cater showrooms, more interesting seminar lineups, bar talk series, and of course, a meet and greet of our speakers. I hope this can be possible next year. Please stay for the fellowship later at 6 p.m. so you could join the raffle and hoping you could win more ng aming raffle prizes and merchandise. Thank you very much again for joining this event. Maraming salamat po.
Woo! And with that, we'll see you later, 6 p.m.
All right.
Sa FOMI.
Sa FOMI, pwede. All right, guys. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us. We'll see you later if you have the time. Please drop by 6 p.m. We'll send you the links.
All right. Kita
All right.
kits.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
guys.
Thank you.
Post na lang sa communities siguro or
Oo.
Facebook.
para sa mga habol.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.